just as packed, fresh ideas, bold voices, and a few unexpected twists.
But before that, don't forget to share your photographs, thoughts, opinions, favorite moments. Use the hashtag ETWLF 2025.
We're tracking your takeaways, your reels, and yes, even your caption choices, so make them count.
So put your phones on silent and let's get started. Our next speaker is not your typical chef. He doesn't just cook food, he provokes with it.
Yeah. His menus have emojis, his dishes have attitude, and his restaurants have broken more rules than most of us dare to in a lifetime.
And in the process, he's redefined what Indian cuisine can be. Bold, global, and just a little bit mischievous. This session is called Rebellion on a Plate, Reinventing Tradition for a World Palate. It's going to be as spicy as it sounds.
In conversation with Amin Ali, please welcome the culinary rebel himself, chef and owner of Gaggan, Mr. Gaggan Anand.
Welcome.
Hi. Hello, India.
Chef Gaggan Anand needs no introduction, but I'll still definitely mention that some of the accolades that he's gone on to achieve till some time ago were reserved for French or Japanese restaurants. Regular feature among world's 50 best, top restaurant in Asia, Michelin 2 stars. How?
I mean, when I wanted to open a restaurant after 10 years of cooking, in 2010, I didn't want to be the best Indian chef of Bangkok. I didn't want to be the best restaurant of Bangkok. I didn't want to be the best restaurant in Asia. I just want to be among the best in the world. And that was the dream I had from the first day. And I think in last 15 years, I have single-handedly just done what I dreamed of. I did not try to motivate others. I didn't try to be a leader. I just wanted to follow a dream. And sometimes when you follow a dream, they come true. You're happy. When there's a nightmare, you learn and make things better and dream better. So this is how I approach life.
And when you started Gaggan, what was the idea behind at that point of time?
See, the funny thing is that I'm back in the same building where I started my career. So I was one of the chef trainees at the Taj Palace, was one of my postings in the Taj as a TMTP, and I was at the Orient Express, which was dedicated French restaurant. And after 1.5 years, I took a sabbatical because I realized that my mom had never cooked French food. And what and how I can understand Indian food from the most common people. And then for 5 years, I was learning to cook from the halwais, from the street food vendors and their secrets. And that's what has become the base of my cooking. Because when I would go, if I cooked a better pasta than an Italian chef, I would still be called a brown guy cooking white food. And that's what I didn't want to do. I wanted to be a person representing my country and not diluting restaurant Indian food and taking common Indian food and elevating it and making it progressive as I cook.
You represent, and the theme of this event is also Indian emergence, Indian dominance around the world, and you represent someone who took Indian cuisine places. What is your take on Indian traveler, Indian diner, and your experience of dealing with them?
There's a big change happening locally. 15 years back, I would not dare to open another restaurant in India. And for the last 10 years, I was trying to convince myself. But what has happened is India has learned how to eat better. We've grown. I was just telling him, like, a friend of mine who's a very famous ramen chain in Japan, I told him, do you know that a few restaurants in India have Japanese food and there are queues? He said, yes, I know, and I'm trying to invent a vegetarian ramen for India, which is an absolutely meat-based cuisine. So I think that is a change. When a Japanese chef is trying to implement vegetarian cuisine to enter the market of India, or French chefs or pastry chefs or famous French chefs who were first thinking, I should open a restaurant in Bangkok, I should open a restaurant in London or in Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, is now thinking, I should open in India. So India has become that animal that consumes not only good food, but consumes luxury of cooking from different parts of the world and appreciate it. We have become world travelers, we started to understand the globe of cooking, not just stuck to our own ways of eating it. I think we eat more Chinese food than the Chinese itself. Yeah, that's our cuisine now. So I think we have become, and that is what I think is that India has itself become, and I tell you, my own business, I run 7 restaurants. 2, I put my name, and 5 are my competitors. And all my restaurants, about 20 to 30% of the client before used to be Americans and Japanese, is now Indians. So financially, luxury-wise and taste-wise, Indians are the next. And if you are in Paris or in New York in a fancy restaurant, your next table will be an Indian banker or an Indian enthusiast or an Indian foodie. And hopefully not an Indian influencer. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Okay, you've also spoken openly about AI never being able to replace Gaggan.
I'm anti-AI. I know some of you are living on AI. I think, let me tell you a very humbling experience. So, one of my favorite places to eat in India is in Amritsar in the Golden Temple in the Langar. Okay, where the recipes have not changed. And there's no standard recipe, where everything is depending on what was donated and who's cooking. And it is one of my dreams. I spoke to the people there that I want to improve it, improve the infrastructure, and yet keep the spirituality of that place, because we don't understand the value of it, but it is the biggest communal kitchen in the world. It is the biggest communal kitchen that works 24/7. And my dream is to make it modernized, and yet people who want to do seva can still go and do seva. And that is what I think is modernization and max of it. But if tomorrow, in 50 years from now, we start eating pills and that replaces our daily diet, or AI tells you how to make a rajma chawal or a khichdi, I think it's the end of humanity. Because I believe that one of the things that we have in today's fast living cities, which was before everywhere, but it's also in India, where men and women compete for the same job, so the kitchens are empty back home. Where my mom was a domestic slave. All she knew was how to cook. And that was her daily job. And take care of our children and who we are, what they'll eat for lunch, what the food will be in the lunch for the school, and what my husband would expect me to cook on dinner. So today's woman, it's good in a way that we are not taking care of our grandmother's recipe. I don't know how many of you know your grandmother's recipe. But that is the legacy, and we did not document it well. And I think if AI comes in and takes over all that, I think it's end of cooking. And I think if you end of cooking, it's end of humanity. So I think I'm anti-AI. AI can promote many good things in the world. They can research on cancer, blah, blah, blah. Everything perfect, done. But do not touch food. Yeah, come on. I mean, it is. Tell me, how many of you want to eat food from my hands, or your mother's hands, or from my AI robot? And if you want to eat from AI robot, then you belong there.
How do you stop that in your kitchen?
See, I'm a massive analog guy. Okay, we live in a digital world. The first love letter I wrote to my girlfriend was about 27 pages. Now you can just sell the emoji. A heart expresses love, a broken heart means I need more love. And I thought, I had done a lot in the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2000 and COVID. And in COVID, I took a 2 years break. COVID gave me the best thing in life, you know. It made me think what I should do with food. So I was in New York. I was just talking to a friend of ours, who I just met. And I went to New York to watch a concert. And then I stayed there and I saw opera. I saw theater. And when I saw opera and theater, I got so involved in performance art. And I'm a good speaker. And that's why I'm here. I'm not cooking, right? And you're not eating, and I'm trying to make you hungry with my words. So I created a 14-seat chef table, and I created an opera where you cannot use your phone, you cannot take a flash photo, you cannot even talk to the next person to you, because this is what you do what do you guys do in a restaurant? You're on your phones, your best loved person is next to you. Restaurants are no more about romance, it's about showing off. The chef is trying to explain the ice cream, but the influencer is trying to influence his own life or her life. And I thought I want to be more valid. And I took a big risk, and that's why I made a 14-seat restaurant without any awards, because in my last decade, I had won so many awards that I was tired of awards. I was tired of fame. And then I realized, I will make sure there is a restaurant in the world where I will make you all feel human again. And the first way is to provocate you. And in our restaurant, we only allow, now many of you will try to say, I want to buy out your restaurant. You're so arrogant, you don't allow us to buy out. But I don't, because in my restaurant, only 2 people or 4 people max can book from one nationality. I bring in color, culture, diversity. This is what India is. You know, when you go to America, the next news you see is racism. In India, we have so many people of different castes, color, cultures, language. I mean, I only speak 3 Indian languages. And many people don't believe this also. But diversity in our food, everything, is what I bring in on a global platform. And that's where I say, you come in right behind the speaker, you're blown up music, and I make you human again. And I think that is my job. And again, it goes against technology. Yeah. How far can tech take food?
It cannot take food far. That's what you believe. Because food is now looked at as tech, easy to order, quick. You get it in no time.
I mean, it helps us. I also live on an app. We all like apps. It's fast, it's smooth, easy to communicate, easy to choose. But I always believe it's like a part of it is okay until it's not okay. Yeah. It's like AI, I think, is great for everything else. Maybe it's good to solve hunger problems. That is good for AI. But is it good for fine dining? I don't think so.
Indian restaurants around the world now are winning some of the top accolades. What changed over the last 2-3 years?
I think in the last 10 years, when I became a chef in 1997, I was a musician. I wanted to be a musician. There was no money in the music I played. And then my parents said, become a chef, which this is the next thing you'd like to do. And everybody in my family called me a black sheep until I became what I have become. Today I run a restaurant with Louis Vuitton, which is the biggest company in the world. And I am the first Indian to open a fine dining restaurant with a French brand. And not a French chef. They have cafes, but I'm the first guy to do fine dining. And that was putting like a flag on the Mount Everest for me. Because I wanted to prove that an Indian can go, it's the other way around. And that leads an example to everyone Because even for us as consumers, we didn't want to spend money on fine dining on Indian food. That has changed. And that has motivated so many young chefs from Bangalore to Himalayas to east and west of India, where young chefs are not cursed by this. Will I be successful? I will be successful because the people want to eat my food. The change has happened in this audience, not in us. We were always cooking good food. But now you are appreciating better Indian food. This is what I think.
Indian diaspora and its spending capacity now is well known and well sought after. Is Indian market also ready for, say, example, a Gaggan?
It's more than ready. I think, as I said, look in Dubai. I call it the India of the Middle East. And look at London, which is little India for us. It's the most first world India we have. And in any London famous restaurant or Dubai restaurant, you'll have many Indian tables who travel from here just to go eat there and eat in fine dining. And I think that is what has happened, is what I was telling in the beginning, that India is not just more than ready, it's at the prime of what we are. We are growing financially, we are growing mentally, and we are growing in a very, very sophisticated way. We appreciate art in cooking.
What is the way forward for you?
I am 47 years old. And I think I've cooked a lot for 28 years. I want to end my life cooking. That's how I want to expect. There's no retirement. But I'm diversifying. I'm opening a hotel in 2 years from now. And I want to make people, because I often suffer this. I am in the most comfortable bed that the food is not good. And then you are at the best restaurant in that hotel, and the hotel toilet doesn't have a flush. Not the flush. What do you call that? The sprinkler, yeah. I was very happy when I was at the hotel here. They had the sprinkler, It's an Indian problem, right? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
very important.
Yeah. We are the most cleanest people in the world. You don't imagine that. Yeah. So I think
Coming back to you.
Yeah, and that is what I want to create hospitality, because this was taught to us. In my home, people would come just for food, and Atithi Devo Bhava, which is our hospitality. We are only place in the world I get invited in a house is the Indian. Nobody, no nationality like to host people in homes. The Thais hate it, Singaporeans don't like it. Other people's homes are not livable, so they don't ask you all to come. Only Indians in any part of the world, would you like to come and have a meal in my home? Because we believe in hospitality. We like to force feed. That's why we have an extra 6 packs, Yeah. We have 1 pack. We don't have 6 pack. Everywhere you see people are fit 6 packs. We have 1 pack people. Family pack, So we love eating. We love hosting. And even we are full. Say, I used to remember my mom used to say, "Mom, I'm not feeling well. I'm bloated." She said, "Don't worry, have a lassi." Yeah. And at the age of 42, I realized I was lactose intolerant. And I told Mom, I'm lactose intolerant. She says, "What is that?" I said, "Mom, just try not having lactose for 12 days and then take a glass of milk and put it in your mouth and feel how your stomach is." And I think half of this room is also lactose intolerant. You just don't know. Practice this. 12 days, do not have milk, don't have butter, and ghee is also lactose, by the way. Okay? Just don't have it. And after 12 days, take a glass of milk first thing in the morning and then feel the next 6 hours. If it is pain, you're intolerant. If it's pleasure, keep having milk.
What is the way forward for Indian restaurants in India and internationally?
The sad thing is that Indian restaurants are run by corporates. It's sad. I started my journey not in 2001 or 2. I started in 2007. I took $500, went to Bangkok. I had 2 Fab India shirts, 1 Lee Cooper jeans and a Wrangler jeans and a torn Nike shoes. And from there, I run business with LVMH. I didn't even knew what Louis Vuitton was. In fact, one of the things was that the first time I thought Louis Vuitton was something very luxury, I went to Paris, I bought a belt, and it had LV there. And the LV belt was 500 euros. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of money, and I saved money, and I want to buy Zara and blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to show off the LV, because it was all about show off. But when I sat, the LV used to hurt my belly all the time. So I said, why is it that $400, $500 belt is hurting me so much? Yeah. From there, learning luxury, doing things, I've learned and I've acquired, and I'm still not wearing LV. And this is my personal painful learning experience. In India, it's sad to say that not many chefs have that opportunity. But I always say that I took the risk. I was born fearless. I took the risk. Many of us always think that we live fearlessly and we always have to do things because we want to secure ourselves financially, secure our dreams financially. But I always like to think that I am born fearless. I was born at the lowest end of the pyramid. So whatever I do is better than what I did before. And I think that is what most of Indians are. That's why we strive so well. Yeah. And I think nowadays you see chefs not being burdened by a financier, but being himself or herself. And I think in future, I guarantee you, I am sure that one day Michelin will be having their own guidebook in India. You'll have more award systems in India where we'll be rewarded for all our thousands of years of our legacy.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Gaggan. We are proud of what you've done and achieved. And thank you so much for taking time out and coming over here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaggan. That was less of a talk and more of a tasting menu of ideas.
All right, just a quick note that we have parallel sessions happening. The first one is called From Infrastructure to Indo-Pacific, Charting the Future of the Indo-Japan Corridor. And the second one, that's at 3 o'clock. The second one at 3:38 is called Advancing India's Green Transition, Aligning Policy, Innovation and Industry for a Net Zero Future. These two conversations are happening in the Mumtaz Hall just outside this hall. If you're interested in either of those, one at 3, one at 3:38, please do head on there. Coming up next is a conversation with a designer who has redefined what it means to be Indian and global at the same time.
His work has made heritage feel like high fashion, storytelling part of every stitch, and luxury deeply rooted in craft and culture.
From dressing Bollywood royalty to creating global collections that carry an unmistakable Bengali flair, his brand has become a language of its own. This next session is titled The Fabric of Identity, Craft Culture and Global Indian Luxury. He will be speaking with my co-host, Abha Bakaya. Abha, if you can take your seat. And please welcome the founder and creative force behind Sabyasachi Mukherjee himself. Sabya, can we have you on stage?
Okay, great. I can see all the phones out already. I know this is a conversation that everyone's been looking forward to. It's great to actually just have Sabya on a stage and captive for, a few minutes and see what he has to say on some of the happenings that we're seeing globally. So I'm going to dive right in because the one thing we've been talking about across some of our panels, of course, is Trump, trade, and the current geopolitical tension when it comes to commerce. Sabya, you have a store in New York. You must have an inside view on really how this is going to impact those that are conducting business back home.
So before I talk about America and Trump, in previous sessions I've already said that globally, craft should not be tariffed because craft is a soft power that creates diversity in the world, and it doesn't mean about craft in India, but craft anywhere in the world. Because if you make craft endangered, you kill a country's historical legacy, and then what are we leaving for the future children? Because it's not nice to live in a flat world. It's nice to live in a round world where there's diversity everywhere, so that there's reasons to travel, reasons to discover, reasons to experience authenticity. But having said that, let's talk about what's happening today. You see, we are getting into a protectionist environment where all countries are looking after themselves. So this is the real rise of non-inclusive nationalism. And when that happens, I think India is in a great position. I'll tell you the reason why. For the longest time, we haven't really played from our strength. There are many countries which can create a lot of products, but there are a lot of things that India can do that no country can do, because India's soft power is actually India's hard power. We've always thought of India's soft power as India's soft power. Craft, culture, music, celebration, architecture, food. But, when your soft power comes from your historical legacy, and India has such a strong legacy, if you start creating products with soft power, the price of product might go up and up and up, but it will become an irreplaceable product that the world cannot get anywhere else. And that monopoly that you create out of wisdom and heritage will always scale no matter what kind of tariffs go up. And we are in a good situation in America because of the fact that, we don't create products like Chanel and Hermes and Louis Vuitton because we create products that they cannot create because it's all made with Indian heritage. So unfortunately, the customer has to pay more, but the customer will pay because we have always made sure that Sabyasachi is an irreplaceable brand.
Amazing. I think that was really well said. I think I can have a round of applause for, yes. Thank you. You always talked about really building a larger message with your global growth and your global presence as well. Do you see that reawakening, that re-owning of Indian craft culture, especially among the global diaspora, the youth, when you're looking at globally, your clients as well at this point?
I've again said this before, and I'm going to say it again, because this is only true, that, I'm 51 years old, so I started in an analog world. Digital came to me much later. So I've seen the transition from the era of information, when the internet first came in, to the age of influence. Right now, we are in the age of intelligence, and the final frontier is going to be the age of wisdom. And it's already happening, because as the world gets more and more impaled by technology and AI, human beings are going to struggle to find humanity again, and this is going to give rise to wisdom and idealism. And I already see that happening in a lot of youth in the country. And for a younger population that is quite tired of what world they are inheriting, they are going to start forging better change. And I think that we are going to get into a place where people are going to become more and more heritage proud. I'll give you a simple example. I'm in the business of doing bridal wear. Children don't ask their parents anymore for advice. They ask their grandparents, because they will always say the grandparents know better because they came from a better world. So, there is a generation that plunders and there's a generation that restores. The younger generation of India is very India proud. They are very savvy. They wear their identity not from a colonial baggage, but from a point of identity which is very authentic. And I think that's going to be a great time for the country.
And you've always said that we're not a third world civilization, we're a third world country, we're a first world civilization. Yes. But what have been your learnings, Sabya, when it comes to carving out a global presence, creating that mind space in consumers' minds, all over the world? What have been your learnings in that journey that we can perhaps take from? Because today, there's a lot of interest when it comes to the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in India, in going global, in carving out a niche in some of those markets. What would be your advice to some of them?
See, if you're creating something with somebody else's identity, you're creating a commodity. But if you're creating something with your own identity, it's a luxury. Why I say it's a luxury is because the most uncommon thing in people, which should have been very common, is self-confidence. So when you create something that comes from a position of confidence, then everybody wants to be a part of that ecosystem, because what they buy is not a product, they buy is confidence. And I think, whenever I've gone outside India or whenever I've been inside India, what we have always given is the unshakable Indian confidence that comes from knowing your country, knowing who you are, and not being embarrassed by it. And I think that sort of confidence keeps rubbing off on people, because, You see, the whole world is about people who subjugate and people who dominate. Once you stand up and say that, I'm not going to be subjugated because I know my sense of confidence, the negotiations change. And I think that's what we do. I've always told everybody in India that whenever you go outside in the outside world, always stand up for who you are and negotiate from a standpoint of confidence. People will give you what you want.
Okay. So on that thread, you had these, and you said earlier that you don't do designs like the usual luxury, high street brands. You had these patchwork jackets, I think, with crucifix designs that in your partnership with Neiman Marcus. How did that go down? Because that would have been really unusual. How did you get customers to adapt to it?
When I go out into the West, what I want to do is I want to give them their clothing but made with Indian handicraft or Indian craftsmanship. I don't want to be a cultural bully by telling them, this is my product and this is what you have to wear. That never works. Because what happens, at every level, it needs to be a collaboration, and it needs to be a collaboration of equal partnership. So I will say the silhouette is yours, but the craft is mine. So I think the biggest trick of going into unknown markets is to understand their culture and provide a solution that involves your culture. And when you create that cultural partnership, which is both equal, and where there is no dominance or subjugation, there's no appropriation, that is the best way forward.
And you've done a whole host of global partnerships. I've got a very long list here, but Neiman Marcus, Louboutin, H&M, Bergdorf, the list goes on. What are you working on next? What can we look forward to?
Whenever I've done a global collaboration, it's always been about telling the India story. One of the most groundbreaking ones was H&M. And when they first came in, and I said, okay, fine, if you want a part of my market share of my country, then you better give me a part of your market share as well. So I said to them that this needs to be a global collaboration. We need to create things with an Indian identity, and we also need to make sure that a lot of the things are actually produced in India, not in other countries. They accepted every one of them. Then I said that, because it's H&M and Sabyasachi, we have to have one sari. That for them was a little dodgy because they'd never done a sari before. They said, we are a Western fashion brand. But I said, but your market is India, and we have to democratize the sari and give it a little bit of a fashion statement. And they agreed. I did the same thing with L'Oreal. I remember when I was doing the collaboration with L'Oreal, I said, you will have your Eiffel Tower, but we'll have Aishwarya Rai, not in a gown, but in a sari, because there needs to be an equal representation of both Paris and India. And I think whenever we've done collaborations, we have always done it from the point of view that we have to tell the India story. And these collaborations become ambassadors to geographies where people don't know much about the country or the craft. But having done my bit, I think the best collaboration that I want to do right now is with myself. I want to grow the business deeper and bigger in India, and I think we are in a better position to tell the India story ourselves and not through anybody else.
Okay. So talking about democratization, congratulations on your partnership with Tata Click. You've also got Sabya products now that you can get for as much as 50,000. So is this something that you also want to go deeper into, making it more accessible, a new way of engaging with consumers?
I was born middle class. People might laugh at me, but that's the truth. When you're middle class, you're always middle class. It never changes, no matter how much changes happen with your money. So I really understand the importance of value. In India, people only talk about price. They not talk about value. There's a different, price is a different thing, value is a different thing. Value is, when people talk about Sabyasachi jewelry, for instance, they'll say, oh, 1 crore ka jewelry hoga, 2 crore ka jewelry hoga. Deepika Padukone ne pehna hai, it's in Harrods, it's here, it's there. But you don't understand what we give for that price. I think for the first time, because we run national ads everywhere, including your paper, people sat with their calculators and they realized the price of Sabyasachi jewelry, because we have been an extremely value-conscious brand. One of the reasons why this is one of the largest brands in India is because people come back again and again, and if you don't have repeat customers, just because if it's a good product, it needs to be a valuable product. People need to see the intrinsic quality of the product, and if it works with the price point, people will come back again and again. Sabyasachi jewelry has great value. It probably has better value than most of the biggest jewelers in the country. And our quality is exemplary. It's a Birla company on a Tata platform. And I think we sold out about 75% of our inventory in the first 8 hours.
I think the site crashed, yeah.
And I think this is what you do. I think when people look at fashion designers, they think that, we don't create value. One of the biggest brands continue to be in business for the longest period of time is because what you do is you actually create timeless value. People just don't know how to put it together.
So let's talk about the Sabya Bride, because that's your signature. And, through the years, we've seen shifts in moods, trends. There was an experimental phase. There was a pretty phase. What are brides looking for today?
I think today all brides are looking for identity. I think there was a time when women had to get dressed a certain way because there was a stifling patriarchy in the country and women didn't have rights of their own. A lot of girls got married off at ages where they did not have the right to proper education because they had to build homes. And, a lot of big weddings were really about business partnerships, never about the bride and her identity. But today what is happening, the world has changed. The girls are getting married after they've established business, after they've traveled all over the world. And I think when you understand what your identity is before your marriage and when you're empowered, how you get dressed on the day of your wedding reflects that stronger identity. You're nobody else's bride but your own woman. And I think increasingly that choice is showing up in people where people say, I don't have to wear a 20-kilo lehenga to get married. A simple printed organza saree is just fine because I don't want to waste that kind of money. Or somebody will say, no, I want to wear craft because I want to buy a piece that I can pass down to my children. The triggers are very different. The triggers are not about just looking like a decorative figure in your own wedding, but being an empowered person who creates the right social choices for herself. That's changed.
Okay. You're one of the few businessmen and fashion designers that has managed to actually cross the barrier between both, because very often after you see a conglomerate come in, there is fear or a natural sort of evolution into commoditization of the brand. You still manage to preserve the experiential part of the brand, the value, the essence. How do you, like you said earlier, put it all together?
It really is about having perspective, because building a luxury brand is like building a tree. So you build the foundation for years and years and years, and you wait for the tree to flower and fruit, and when the fruits happen, then you take the seeds and distribute it into other verticals. You cannot hurry up the process. All the biggest luxury brands in the world, which have got sustainable growth and which have lasted for over hundreds of years, have all been created with a single formula, that it's purpose over greed. When I started building Sabyasachi, and I remember I used to have a show called Band Baja Bride, and every girl who watched that show wanted to be a Sabya bride. And every time somebody met me at the airport or at a common area, they said, we would love our daughter to get married on your show. And then the big Bollywood weddings happened, and people said, oh, we love how you dressed up Deepika or Anushka or Priyanka. Today, the conversation has completely changed. They don't talk to me about product anymore. They only say, you make us so proud. And I wonder, it's such a small company. Why? It's probably because we've run the company with exacting integrity. I don't think Sabyasachi belongs to me. If you go into the Instagram, it used to have my face. It's been replaced by the tiger. I don't say I anymore. Whenever we make a mission statement about the brand, I say we, because there's a collective 2,000 odd people who are working tirelessly towards preserving the growth of the brand. And when I sold the company to Mr. Birla, I told him that, Mr. Birla, the brand does not belong to me. It does not belong to you. It belongs to India. We are just the gatekeepers, because what we are building through this is a corridor of hope, which will remain for the next generations to say, okay, we should be proud of our identity and our heritage. And this is the reason why I've always done what is right for the brand, not what is right for me.
Fantastic. You've clearly, are catering now to different segments of the market. But how deep do you feel is the Indian luxury market? Where it is now and where it could be, let's say, in the next 5 years?
India is probably one of the most intelligent markets in the world. You are not going to get seduced by an LV belt. if the bell does not give you value and if it doesn't poke. I think we are very value conscious customers. People always say that, they talk about India and they say, India is a country that produces cheap and they buy cheap. I say, hey, don't make that mistake. This country does not buy cheap. This country buys value. This country is not going to put their hard-earned money. This country has seen being ruled for centuries, much even before the British has come. Then the British came. Then the partition happened. And there were so many political turmoils and everything. And we have really, really worked very hard through all of them. It has not only hardened us, but it has also given us a sense of pragmatism. And that's a third world pragmatism, as we call it. And we are not going to squander that away for something that we don't believe in instinctively. And I think in India, if you create a luxury brand that focuses on the principles of value and not principles of price, you can go very deep. It's not going to be instantaneous, but this is also a country that unites and opens up to anything that it sees value in. So if you build it beautifully and if you build it in a very inclusive manner that every people in the country feels that they're a stakeholder in your company, it's going to become a very large company.
All right, that sounds promising and exciting. It's already a large company, so what's next? Which is the thread that you're most excited about right now?
When I turned 50, the fact that you're not immortal, it hits you, it gives you a reality check, and you realize that you have very little time in the world, and you need to speed up and do much more. I'm going to spend the next 15, 20 years doing mentorships so that, I didn't want to become like a Mr. Armani. He's still, God bless him, is still at 90, still helming the brand. I want to get a younger generation of people who will run the business. I've just recently appointed a wonderful CEO. We have a great design team. I think I will use the next 15 to 20 years in stewarding the company in such a way that the company can continue long after I've gone. And I will use the next 20 years to influence Indians to believe in themselves more. Thank you.
I just wanted to get a note on your foundation as well, because we talked about creating experiences, and his stores are, of course, signature icons everywhere. Can we also perhaps see something from you at VNA or Bhavdaji Lal, or are you looking to create something that perhaps maintains or preserves or tells a story of Indian heritage?
I think art is very important to me. A lot of art in the world today, unfortunately, has become commodified because it's become about labels, which gallery is hosting you, who dresses up where, who networks better. And a lot of artists are struggling because they can't do all of that thing. My mother was a great artist. She had to let go because she could not speak English and she was raising her children. So she had to let go of her dreams of becoming an artist to becoming a housewife. And I've never forgotten that. It's made me feel very guilty. So we started the Sabyasachi Art Foundation. The idea of the foundation is to mentor artists who are going to become the next generation of artists. We already have one person called Atish Mukherjee, who has done a residency with me for 12 years. And we finally launched him. And I think some of the most important collectors in the country have already, he had a sold out exhibition. And I personally think he's going to become the next Sousa or the next Hussain of the country. So what I will do is I will use my platform, because, I say this from Spider-Man, that when God gives, when with great powers come great responsibility. I'm going to use the next 20 years of my life using the platform of Sabyasachi to spotlight on young talent that can grow up and become the next big stars of India without exploitation, so that they can find a future that will help them grow without fear.
Fantastic. I really wish we had more leaders like this, because someone who's made a mark for himself, for India, for his brand on the global stage, and everybody wants a piece of Sabya today. It continues to be a huge aspiration. I'm so glad that you're finding ways to pay it forward. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabya, for that remarkable perspective. rooted in heritage and yet reaching for the world. And thank you all for joining us on this journey through fabric, culture, identity. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Sabyasachi Mukherjee. And as we gather here in the Darbar Hall, the Mumtaz Hall right next door is alive too with dialogue from reimagining the Indo-Japan corridor to exploring how India can lead the global green transition.
Our next speaker works at the intersection of urban design, digital innovation, and everyday life, quite literally.
Now, whether you're stuck in traffic or waiting for your ride to arrive, chances are he's already thinking 3 moves ahead.
He's helped shape how millions move across India and now leads global mobility at one of the world's most recognizable tech platforms.
To deliver the next address titled Rewiring Urban India, Mobility, Access and the Future of Movement, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Global Head of Mobility at Uber, Pradeep Parameswaran.
Thank you. It's quite a challenge. First is the afternoon slot. Everybody sort of had a good lunch, and then I'm following 2 absolute legends in Gaggan and Sabyasachi, so I have a bit of a hard job. But hopefully we'll keep it exciting. So I grew up in Bombay in the 80s and 90s in a suburb called Chunawati. My local transportation was always public transportation, so local train Zindabad. It was amazing. It made me move around fast. It was cheap. When I had an allowance that I could afford, I would take the auto. We never had a car, and we never thought that was necessary. And then I moved to Gurgaon in 2008, and when we moved to Gurgaon, bustling, sort of really coming up, you could feel the vibe, really exciting city, very dusty, and, reasonable amount of traffic. And I look at 2025, what's changed? Not much, no? It's still buzzy. It is still really busy. There's a lot of construction still going on. What used to be 10 sectors, now I think it's like 25 or 30 sectors. And it's still crazy. Despite building so much, our experience on the roads is just miserable as ever. My wife is in the audience today. She travels from Delhi to Gurgaon every day, and it's probably an hour and a half one way. And I think about why that is the case. And it's not because we are not building. The Indian government spend on CapEx infrastructure is 800% up in the last few years. It's 3% of spend. DMRC is one of the world's busiest and best metro systems, and yet transportation is a challenge simply because we are in the midst of a once-in-a-civilization type moment. And what's that? Everybody knows it. It's mass urbanization. 270 million people. Now, these numbers get numbing because we live in India and we take it for granted, but 270 million people will move into cities between now and 2035. Is there any hope that you can build enough roads to keep up with that? Right? Today, this is an upwardly mobile country. People should come to cities because this is where the excitement is. This is where growth is. This is where opportunities are. This is where innovation is happening. But the moment people make it in life, first thing you do obviously is housing. But once you've done that, what's the next thing you do? You buy a car, right? That's the symbol. That's what everybody wants to get to. That is the signature of being upwardly mobile in our country. But there's just not ever going to be enough space on the roads. Some stats are always bothersome because we look at this every day. 90% of your time, your car is standing idle. 90% of the time. If you go to most cities, about 20 to 40% of space on the road is used for parking, right? So cars are not moving. Cars are going to be parked. On an average, there is 1.3 people in a car. That means 70% of your road capacity today is being used by 20% of the people. How will this work? And that's why, if you think about solutions for a country of our scale and size, it cannot be a solution that is dependent on roads, and it cannot be a solution that is dependent on private vehicles. I think we have the right intent, but the scale and the speed at which we are building transport infrastructure has to keep up. We want to be a developed country by 2047. That's our goal. That's our Prime Minister's desire. To be able to do that, we have to move not at US scale speed, not at UK scale speed. Those are all old benchmarks. The only benchmark today is China's speed and scale, because they are building the scale of public transportation that allows everybody in this room to use it. Quick show of hands, how many of you all took Delhi Metro to get here today? Fact, zero. Right? And that's the problem. Right? You need to make India a place where it is perfectly acceptable, not just acceptable, that's the only way you should want to travel, because it will be faster, for sure. It is definitely going to be cheaper. Today you won't take it because there are many things that are broken, and I'll come to that in a second. And ultimately, we do live in the place that is amongst the most polluted in the world today. I don't know how many of the world's top 10 polluted cities are in India. Both my kids have grown up here in Gurgaon, and both of them have had asthma for the longest time in their growing up phase. And that has to change, and that can happen only if public transit can really get to that level. It has to become first, not just convenient, but it's got to be okay to live, right? Like once you get in, if you're going to be pushed around, there's no place to sit, you're not going to take it because you can afford to take a car. You would rather sit in a car for an hour and a half than take the push and the shove and the difficulty of going into a metro. So that needs to get fixed. The other thing that needs to also get fixed is first and last mile connectivity. You live 1 kilometer from the metro, 2 kilometers from the metro, how do you get there? There are no great solutions. When you get on the other side, you need to get to office. You probably are still 10 minutes away. How do you get there? You need to find a solution that combines the first and last mile. Anybody from Bangalore in this audience? I hate picking on Bangalore because of traffic, but I'll do because it's always entertaining. On an average, a Bangalorean loses 15 days in a year because of the time they have spent in traffic. 15 days. Yaar, utni chutti mil jati, to imagine how life would have been. That's the level of wastage that we are willing to put up with. And frankly, I think that is okay in the India of the past, but for the India of the future, that has to change. So when you talk about the first and last mile access, one of the things that Uber's been involved with more recently is the really boring solution, but seems quite innovative, bike taxis. India has 250 million two-wheelers for a country of 1.3 or 4 billion people. It's the second largest two-wheeler market in the world. It works really well. It's 1/3 the cost. It's really fast. It's typically meant for first and last mile. But in India, there is still a fair amount of regulatory uncertainty on this topic. It is the mode that is likely today, other than autos and e-rickshaws, the only other solution that could scale. That brings me to the third piece of it. Let's assume you have amazing mass transit metro systems. And let's assume that you have really good first and last mile. We still need technology to come to the play because who's going to do this? First pay for your bike ride, then buy the ticket, stand in queue, or tap, or get in, then get on the other side, find something else. It's broken today. You have to make that seamless. ONDC is trying. I think it's got the first steps going. But there's a lot more to do because every single metro system in this country is on a different stack. Every public transit is on a different stack. They're all building their own technologies that has to come together. So when you leave the house and press a button, you know you have tickets for everything. You know what mode is going to arrive at what point in time so that you can jump on it and go forward. Right? That's the solution that you have to get to. Which brings me to why I'm on this podium today. There are a couple of really important reasons to think about this. Of course, this is about moving the country, right? Transportation is core. It's not fancy, it's not fun. You go because you have to. How many of you all really go to take your transportation because you enjoy it, right? It's a pain. We just do it because और कोई option है नहीं. Work from home खत्म हो गया, so you have to go to work. And that makes it hard, right? But you think about the reasons why you do it, and one of the reasons is thinking about participation in the workforce for women. And I want to make this connection a little bit more explicit because in India today, 37% of women are part of the workforce. For any country that aspires to be a leading country, this is the lowest of the low benchmarks for that scale, right? And one of the big reasons why that doesn't happen is because women feel unsafe in public transportation. Now, at Uber, got to say, we had our own challenges, but I will say this, the amount of technology, training, systems we have built to invest in safety, our riders come back and say 88% of the women who use ride-hail feel like it's a much safer option. Building that type of safety systems has to be true across every single mode of transport. That's a big reason to do it. The second reason to do it, and I'll tell you a personal story. In 2016, when I joined Uber, when I got the offer, my family was around, and so I told my wife, and the two of us told this to my son. My son at that time was 8 years old, and when he heard that I was going to join Uber, he started crying. And so we were puzzled, why is he crying? And then he said, Papa, aap taxi chalaoge? And it was striking, actually, right? It was funny at that time, but frankly, you think about one of the issues in our country is dignity of labor. There are multiple millions of people today that are bringing your quick commerce delivery to you in 10 minutes, people who are bringing your food to you in an hour, your Amazon packages overnight, and obviously on the click of a button, they are coming to pick you up. And we need to make this a profession that has dignity attached to it. And formalizing the gig economy is something that is super critical, and it's something that India is in the very, very early stages of. So, many reasons why transportation is important, but women's participation, as well as that the uplifting of the gig economy workforce and bringing dignity of labor, equally critical. The last thing today I'm going to spend time on is how can you talk about mobility and mobility future without talking about self-driving cars? The last 2 years of my life in my role at Uber, I've taken probably 50, 60 self-drive rides in 4 countries. I've done it in the US, I've done it in China, I've done it in the Middle East, I've done it in London. And I can pretty confidently say that this is a solved technology issue. There's always going to be the remaining 5, 10% that is still there, but it works, and it works beautifully. Early rider feedback is so positive because, frankly, a lot of people just don't want somebody else in their vehicle with them. It gives them privacy, it gives them space, let alone there are 6 cameras in the car that are directly looking at you, but we have gone past the time. It's okay for us to be digitally out there, but it's uncomfortable when there is another human being involved. So adoption signs are pretty positive. It is interesting, our minister here will say India is probably going to not be the first market where autonomous happens, which I think is true because we also have low labor cost. But the other reason people say is because, yaar, tumne road dekhi hai hamari? Yahan pe self-drive car kaise chalegi? And I want to tell you one story. I was in the back alleys in the suburbs of Beijing. And honestly, I mean, that could have been Patel Nagar, or it could have been Kirti Nagar, or any of our markets. And self-drive cars were absolutely perfectly able to navigate that chaos. I did a trip in London for folks who have traveled on the roads. It's not great. I mean, these are narrow roads. There's a lot of traffic. It is unpredictable. And that technology on London roads also works really beautifully. Now, there are many other things to be sorted out. Technology is still early. Economics are still to be worked out. Maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 15 years. But you are headed to a world where those two things come together. Some of our guests have said they're pro-AI, some have said they're anti-AI. For sure, transportation is going to be the largest use case for physical AI for the first 15 years of this journey. I think humanoids and robots and all the other things will come later. But it is a revolution that is waiting to happen. And I do wish India is going to be participating in that revolution in a really, really meaningful way. So I'm going to end by saying things that are mostly sort of not very popular, right? The mayor of Barcelona used to say this. They said the pride that comes from being a developed nation is not about when people say, I have my own car to go in. It's when rich people feel like it's most natural to take public transport. And this room probably is a representation of the higher end of our society. When this room feels comfortable taking public transport, that's the point in time we'd say we have truly arrived as a developed nation, because the solution that is the opposite, which is build more roads, get more cars, is only going to make this much worse. So I'll leave that as my thought with you. Hope that was interesting, and for the ET crowd, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Pradeep, for that sharp and future-forward address. We look forward to the day when we all will come here using the metro.
From gridlock to global mobility, it's clear that the journey is far from over, but hopefully a little smoother.
All right, artificial intelligence might be the story of our age, but the real power struggle isn't in the apps that we see. It's in the chips and the systems that make artificial intelligence possible.
In this session, the coming compute wars, who will control the brains of artificial intelligence? We look at a race that will decide not just the speed of machines, but the shape of economies and geopolitics.
And who better to decode that than the pioneer of reimagining the very hardware that AI runs on?
Please welcome the founder and CEO of Groq, Jonathan Ross.
Good afternoon. I said good afternoon. Thank you. All right. So I was invited to do this talk, and if you saw the name of it, I actually had nothing to do with that name, so I apologize. I don't think there's going to be a war coming on. But I do think AI is very important. I've actually been building AI chips since 2012, so 13 years. So I've seen this for quite a while coming. I think one of the more surreal moments I had was when I was just sitting in a taxi and I heard the taxi driver talking on the phone about AI. And that was a moment where I realized it was starting to become real, and especially with the ChatGPT moment that came. So one of the reasons that I get asked to do these talks is I have an unusual ability to make AI simple. And so you've heard a lot of things about how AI is going to be disruptive. You've heard about how it's going to cause job losses, how there's going to be opportunities, and how scary it is. My goal today, and what you can hold me accountable to being on stage, is making a lot of what's going on in AI much clearer. So let's start off with an interesting question, which is AI a bubble, or is it real? So a couple months ago, I was invited to do a talk at Goldman Sachs' inaugural Abu Dhabi event. At this event, there were 50 to 60 hedge fund managers, and every single one of them managed more than $10 billion. So that's $500 to $600 billion, probably over $1 trillion represented there. I was the only tech founder invited to answer some questions about AI. And when they brought me on stage, the first question they asked was, is AI a bubble? And I said, I think you're thinking about this the wrong way. You're thinking of it in terms of economic terms. You're thinking about, I put money in and I get an ROI out. Right now, the tech companies, let's start with Google. So Google's spending $65 billion a year. I think Facebook's spending $65 billion a year. Amazon is spending $100 billion a year. Microsoft's spending $75 billion a year. Those are just 4 tech companies. Now, let's throw in some countries. So we just deployed 20,000 chips in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is going to be spending over $30 billion in the near future. I was just in Japan. I met with the Minister of Economic Security for Japan. He surprised me by telling me that they had just approved a $65 billion budget for AI compute. Okay, why? Well, when I was talking to the hedge fund managers, I asked, who in this room thinks that in 10 years, it is 100% guaranteed that you will be able to outperform AI in picking stocks? 0 hands went up. So I said, okay, if you're a tech company and you write software, and AI is already helping your software engineers write much better software, that it's already producing code without any human intervention that's going into production. 10 years from now, can you afford to have not spent $100 billion a year on AI? And then it made sense. This isn't purely economical. This is geopolitical. What happens if someone else is able to produce more compute than you can? So you're hearing the word compute a lot. Let's explain what compute is. And let's put it in terms that we're all familiar with. So if a country fought a war over oil, we wouldn't be too shocked. In fact, it's happened before. And the reason is energy is economic capability. If you have energy, you can have mechanical advantage, you can build things. If you don't have energy, then your civilization grinds to a halt. Prices escalate, you can't build goods, and you can't trade. When I first started fundraising for Groq, one of the questions I got asked a lot was, sorry, forgot my train of thought here. So in terms of, sorry, I need a prompt here. So when I first started raising money, I got asked, sorry, forgot my line here. Well, let's just go into okay, what I was asked was, is AI going to be the next internet? And the question was interesting, but the answer is absolutely not. And the reason is, AI is a little bit different than the internet. The internet is about replicating data with high fidelity and distributing it across the world. That's an information age technology. It's actually very similar to the telephone. It's very similar to the telegraph. It's the same technology, but of a different degree than the printing press. Replicate, distribute. AI is actually not an information age technology. AI is about creating something in the context that's actually never been seen before. With information technology, it's about storing things. With AI, it's about generating things. If you do not have compute, you actually cannot generate things. So just like you need fuel to run an industrial economy, you need compute. And if you don't have that compute, you cannot have AI. So we've met with over 100 companies in the last 72 hours here in India, and do you know what the number one concern was? Getting enough compute affordably. You can have the best AI model in the world, but if you don't have compute, you cannot deploy it. So right now, if you are an Indian tech company, an entrepreneur, and you want to build an AI company, you have to compete with everyone else to get that compute. Now, every year, NVIDIA builds about 5.5 million GPUs. If they had the ability to build 20 million, they would sell 20 million. That means that it's completely supply constrained. And when a hyperscaler says they want to buy 1 million GPUs, which is, by the way, how many Google's deploying this year, if you had an order in, you go to the back of the list. So let's bring in another term, sovereign AI. Sovereign AI is really just a way to say, we need to be able to control access to compute just like we control access to energy. Just like you have energy security, you need compute security. And this is a new concept. Now, there's another word that's being used a lot, which is disruption. So why are we so concerned about disruption with AI? Well, one of the main contributors of AI is the ability to do work that previously was very expensive and can fundamentally change the economics of a business. When you see the valuations of these AI companies, they all seem like they're overvalued. I mean, it's kind of nuts. Like OpenAI, granted, their revenue has been growing to the point where they're making $1 billion a month now. But $1 billion a month normally wouldn't be worth a $300 billion valuation. We see tech startups, AI startups, that get funded for $1 billion right out of the gate. That's their seed round. That's before they've generated any revenue. How does that make sense? Well, it's not just the value of the company. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier of disruption. The startups aren't just adding to the economy. What's happening is the investors are looking at all of those other companies that exist and saying that the value of those companies is going to transfer to these AI startups. So that's the risk. But there's an opportunity with risk. So right now, if you look at the top 10 tech companies in the United States, 3 of them are led by Indians. So when we first arrived here, we kept getting asked over and over again, why are you in India, given that all the spend is in the US and Europe and these other places? And my answer was, well, those 10 tech companies, where 3 of them are led by Indians, I mean, if we said 3 years ago that Google was going to be at risk of being disrupted by a startup, we would have said, absolutely not. Now, if I ask you which startup is disrupting Google, what's your answer? I heard about ChatGPT, okay, OpenAI. Yeah, so there's Perplexity, so they're at risk. So what that means is, right now, there's an opportunity to change the top 10 tech companies. In 5 years, I would be surprised if any of the current tech companies are on the top 10 still. So instead of it being 3 CEOs who are Indian of tech companies, why not 3 companies that are founded by Indians that are in the top 10? And that's why we're here. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that sharp and eye-opening look into the real battleground of AI. Clearly, in the age of artificial intelligence, it's not just about who builds the smartest models, but who controls the fastest chips.
And as we heard, the real race isn't in the clouds, it's in the silicon. Thank you once again, Jonathan Ross. Our next session is about what really drives the digital economy. No, for those of you asking, it's not cat videos.
Well, it's payments, seamless, invisible, and instant. The battle for your last click and your trust is very real, and increasingly it's powered by artificial intelligence.
In this fireside chat called the Battle for the Last Click Payments in the Platform Age, we hear from someone who heads technology behind one of the world's most powerful payment networks. Over 65,000 transactions a second across 200 countries.
With past roles at Microsoft and Electronic Arts and a present one that shapes the future of AI, platforms and digital trust, please welcome the President of Technology at Visa, Rajat Taneja.
And joining him in this conversation is Editor South at the Economic Times, Archana Rai. Archana, can we have you on stage?
Hello to everybody, and Rajat, thank you so much for joining this conversation. I think we've had some sessions where a lot of discussion has gone on about services and products that require a lot of spending, right? So I thought it would be a good way, so we've had people discuss food, luxury clothing, all of which I think have to do a lot with aspirations, and definitely also with payments. So it makes you understand why India is being seen as, a market where there's a huge trillion-dollar opportunity for payments in the coming years. How do you see Visa in the midst of all this? It is, of course, the largest digital payment service with cards. There is now a huge competitor with India's very own government-backed UPI. So it's a very shifting kind of market. So I thought we could start with you telling us, how do you see Visa in this?
Absolutely. First of all, let me say how much I admire what India has done in its digital journey in a short time, building a full digital stack, from identity to the payment stack to ONDC to the DigiLocker to the aggregation layers, the framework, which is open and portable. It's a phenomenal vision that has come to life, and all of us across the world should admire that. Having said that, the market, it's not a zero-sum game. All of us have one goal, which is to electronify payments. And India is still about 55% cash. There are only about 110 million credit cards, only 55 million of them are to unique individuals. So I think collectively we can do a lot more than we can individually, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And what we have been doing at Visa over the years is we've also opened up our architecture, and we have a set of services that are disaggregated and can connect to networks like UPI and RTP systems, create interoperability between RTP networks, but also we can collectively obsess about the experience of the consumer and protect the consumer from scams, from impersonations, from account takeovers, which is a very big issue right now. And so our risk systems, our fraud systems, our dispute management systems are all available to add on to the payment networks. They are network agnostic. We also have capabilities that merchants can use to manage risk, chargebacks, to have analytics, to connect to multiple gateways together. We have services for the banks to do similar sorts of things. Our cybersecurity stack is available. We've invented a number of products to protect consumers from account takeovers, for example. And these cybersecurity capabilities that we use to protect them at Visa are also available to the marketplace.
So I think essentially what strikes consumers, say, in a market like India, where now the mobile phone is almost literally the primary mode of payment, how would you define the future of cards with OTP required? And, you know, really there are memes on India's OTPs. So how do you see this?
Look, cards are just a form factor. They are plastic and they are very useful in some cases. But really think about it as a modern credential. Think about it as something that allows you to traverse channels, borders, different kinds of payment types. And what we have been doing is we have been reimagining what the credential looks like. Instead of everybody carrying multiple different credentials, we thought, how can we create a permanent single credential, let's say a 16-digit number, that overlays however they want to pay, whether it is through debit, through credit, through installments, and they can choose it by type of merchant, type of location, type of products they are buying, and take control over, and it is tokenized. So it gives them security, it gives them peace of mind, it gives them knowledge that there is a trusted third party who will take care of it. So it provides flexibility, really. And when you have that, OTP is no longer needed, right? OTP can actually be compromised. So things like biometrics and passkeys and one-click checkouts are the sorts of innovations we have been building to ensure this interoperability of experiences, remove the friction, protect the consumer, and move past OTP with biometrics.
Because I think remaining safe and keeping, you know, money safe in a digital world is really top of the mind for most consumers.
Correct.
So with different form factors, where do you think Visa is going to take? What are the new developments that consumers can hope to see with this?
So Flex Credential is one, the tokenized capability. Tap and Go, which allows transit to become a very smooth experience, and you're protected with a trusted foundational system in the back that's compliant and that allows you to know that if you have an issue, it will be dealt with if there's a dispute. So what we have been thinking about is obsessing about the consumer experience in multiple different payment and commerce activities, making it such that the joy of shopping is available to them and the mundane aspects that are bothersome are done by the network in the back end, give them peace of mind.
So is that a role that AI will play? Because we are really talking about fraud detection early on and, sort of in this entire protection issue. What is the role that you think AI will play?
Look, AI has been a fundamental part of the fabric of fraud management, risk management for decades. Our first model, the AI model that we released at Visa, was back in 1993. So AI has been part of the fabric of network like Visa, but it's evolved. It's evolved from simple math equations to deep neural nets that are able to predict patterns and provide a higher efficacy in the protection aspects, not just of the data, but of the infrastructure, and across the board adding new capabilities as well, like loyalty and benefits and so on. But what we are now seeing emerge with the birth of generative AI is a completely different ballgame. With generative AI, for the first time, you have sort of intelligence emerging from these models that it is able to do things it wasn't trained to do, right?
Exactly.
Because of the type of understanding it is getting about human language, human behavior, and all the underlying capabilities that it has seen. So there are a couple things that are going to happen with generative AI. One, you can imagine a world where each of us has a digital twin that knows us deeply and understands us and can do commerce activities for us or bring to us the things that we enjoy and we delight in and is our passion.
Absolutely.
At the same time, on the back end, it is protecting you and doing all the other things that we just talked about. In order to do that, you need a platform that creates AI-ready credentials that enables transparency and privacy and compliance and ensures that the agent is only doing what you need it to do. And the personalization signals that it gets are not just based on user opting in, but also they're trained with fairness and with openness and with compliance to all the rules and regulations. So we are working a lot on the platform, and then a lot of wonderful things will happen on top of that. Thousands of flowers will bloom if you have the underlying platform.
And a lot of this work is getting done out of India, is what I remember. You've been telling me over the conversations we've had about this. And, there is this conversation about India lagging in the AI race and our talent not really being up to speed with the innovation that is happening in other markets. But you've been telling me a story that's different, that a lot of this innovation gets done out of India.
Yeah, that couldn't be further from the truth. The talent in India is extraordinary, world-class, as talent in all the other places. So at Visa, we have our largest R&D center is actually in India. And this month, we celebrated 10 years since we opened it for the first time. We have large organizations in the US, we are building large organizations in Europe, and so on. And what we see in India is something very special. Not only is the talent really world-class in their knowledge, in their expertise, in their training, in their schooling, but there's also a cultural aspect of how they work, how they bond, and how they invent things for the local markets and bring that sense of purpose, seeing in their communities what is needed. And we often refer to people who come and spend time in Bangalore and go back as a Bengaluru glow. It's optimism. Optimism is a force multiplier.
Yeah.
And when you go to a site like Bengaluru, you see that in action. There is a friendships, there is a real sense of mission and purpose. So I would say it's not just world-class, they are creating, they're inventing capabilities that are phenomenal. So Flex Credential that I talked about was conceived of, was piloted and created locally along with colleagues across the world, but it was born here in India, first for the Japanese market. We are rolling it out in Europe, and then we'll be bringing it to India very soon.
So in terms of innovation, definitely India is very present in the visa landscape. So I thought we could just move a little beyond that and think really of the regulatory landscape here for payments. Do you think there is a need for a specialized regulator here?
Look, I think that we are at a moment of time that we do need to collaborate very closely with regulators, right? AI is evolving at a speed and pace and capability that has never happened in the history of the world before, right? In just 2.5 years, models have gone from just finishing sentences to having reasoning, autonomy, chain of thought, and now chain of debate. So you can have a bunch of models working together, solving issues like a work group in a college. And within a few years, these models are going to be smarter than us collectively. They're already smarter than me. They're going to be smarter collectively. And super intelligence is in our line of sight. I'm pretty sure about that based on what I see in the front lines. And in the history of the world, there isn't an example of a less intelligent thing managing a more intelligent thing. So now is the time for us to make sure with regulators that we have openness and understanding of how models are trained and their behavior and governance and drift management, privacy and consent, explainability, fairness, remove the biases, and have a mechanism for ensuring they don't do harm in the future and do really good things across the world as we rewire it with generative AI, whether it is in medicine or in agriculture or in education or, of course, in commerce, the space I love very much.
So, going back to the commerce space itself, with NPCI and UPI that's come in, that's clearly, it's a change agent of a sort that we haven't seen before in the fintech space in India. Visa and other payment, you've experimented with the NUE and with different settlement systems. Is that something that you would want to revive again?
Look, we are in discussions. I think there is goodness to have collaboration and to see how systems can interoperate, how settlement can be done faster. But plumbing has to be created across the entire ecosystem for some of these really hard horizontal problems to be solved. We have the wherewithal, the aspiration to help and to be part of that discussion and to do things that help the ecosystem, help consumers, help merchants.
With more multiple choices, really, for
multiple
payments.
Choices.
Going back again to your favorite of commerce, payment systems have really evolved, but things like tap and pay and go are still a distance away in India. I know in our conversation, you mentioned about transit systems that are all tap and pay in other markets. We are still away from that. What are the sort of innovations that you think will come for Indian consumers in that aspect?
Look, I think if you look at there are probably 1 billion debit cards here in the market, and across the world, if you are traveling in a public transportation system, the friction has been removed because the hardware, both for acceptance and for payment, now allows tokenized credentials to be used by just tapping and going on and tapping out and then getting charged. So it benefits the consumer, it benefits scheduling and traffic and rush hours, if you will, and it adds more choice and it provides more capabilities. So devices like Apple, native tap and go capabilities, tokenized credentials are really important, and I think it will help the community in India as we talk to the regulators to say how this can evolve and be utilized as another way of providing capabilities to the consumers.
In India, digital financial inclusion has been a big aspect, right? And really, in many ways, UPI, I think, has really made that democratic. But there's also of digital empowerment that, there's another aspect to that as well. How do you see that as, that entire landscape?
It's very close to our heart. Doing good by doing right. We have enormous focus on not just giving grants, but actually working in the front lines with government agencies, with NGOs. We've adopted 1,000 villages over here. I think 50,000 members of the community have been trained on financial inclusion. We have worked with the Travel Council to train about 20,000 individuals over there. We are building a program with RRU in Gujarat to roll out our cybersecurity capabilities and expertise to create a cyber certification from Visa for members of the community who want to specialize in it with our knowledge, our training, our curriculum. We have programs that we have rolled out in other parts of the world that we would love to bring to India, which is basically apprentice programs for people who may not be engineers or technical, who want to join the financial space and be part of a company like Visa. So we have folks who are interior designers or theater people who wanted to be coders or be part of working on space like this, and we train them and bring them in. We want to roll it out. Our cybersecurity, for example, is one of the great assets at Visa. We are rated 4.9 out of 5 on a NIST cyber maturity scale, the only company that we believe in the world that has that. And the way we do it is very special and unique. And we want to take it to the colleges, and we want to take it to the community and broaden the use of those practices and inventions. So across the gamut, we want to work in this area.
You know, again, going back to what people can expect in terms of a new mode of payment, there's agentic commerce that's being seen as the next wave of innovation. How will that translate into real-life experience? What are the innovations that consumers can expect to see with that?
Look, it will evolve in many ways, but if you think about what we go through day to day to discover something and buy it, it really hasn't changed in a couple of decades. The last big inflection point was the internet, when you could do e-commerce and you could buy online or on your phone. But the payments became easy. The discovery and buy is still hunt and peck, searching and comparing and all of that. And what agentic commerce promises to do is to bring the era of self-driving, where you may want it to go somewhere and do something, and you can empower it however much you want and say, I like art, or I like music, or I like fashion, or I want to buy electronic equipment for my house, a TV. Go find this stuff, do this stuff, and then let me make the final choice. Or if it knows you well enough, you can empower it to do those things. So shopping and commerce bring joy and happiness and pleasure. And agentic commerce has the ability to enhance that and take all the crummy stuff out. The warranty management, the price matches, the registration, the incidents, the return aspects, the dispute management, and say, hey, I'll do that for you. And so that's the promise, but it needs a platform, it needs compliance and regulation, and it needs trust, and that's kind of what we are focused on. I've never been this excited in my life as to what it can do and what we are building every day, how it can serve merchants, consumers, and economies, and society.
Before we wrap up, I thought I definitely use this opportunity to get you to tell us, what are the 3 do's, what are the 3 don'ts while we all shop?
Well, first of all is be careful when you're shopping with merchants that you don't know. There's a lot of merchants that get set up that might scam you. Decide how you want to pay, credit, debit, or installments, and make sure it's done responsibly when you work with them. And if you have an issue and you're using a Visa card, no, we are behind you and we'll protect you if something happens.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rajat, for that deep dive into the platform era, where the final click isn't just the end of a transaction, it's the beginning of a relationship.
Also, thank you to Archana for asking the right questions at the right time. Thank you, Archana and Rajat. Let's move on to our next session.
I have to say, every time I hear numbers like 65,000 transactions a second, I wonder if half of those aren't just coffee orders.
The other half are my Swiggy and e-commerce orders.
All right, well, coffee sounds healthier. Either way, the digital economy is clearly running on more than just algorithms. It's running on trust, it's running on speed, and a lot of real-time decision-making.
And plenty more of that ahead. So stay with us. But first, one more round of applause. Thank you to Rajat and Archana.
Now, if yesterday was about power and purpose, today we turn to the force reshaping both, and that's AI.
It isn't science fiction anymore. Clearly, AI is redefining how businesses compete, how markets move, and how leaders make decisions.
At the heart of it is a race for speed, for scale, and for trust.
And no, it's not a race that we're already outsourcing to AI. Humans are still running this race for AI dominance.
To take us inside AI Unleashed, the next great innovation race, we are joined by
the founder and CEO of YNI Systems, Dr. Vishal Sikka.
The CEO of
Publicis Sapient, Nigel Vaz.
The founder and CEO of Groq, Jonathan Ross. And the president of Broadridge Financial Solutions, Chris Perry.
Gentlemen, can we have you on stage? And moderating this discussion is management thinker and author Navi Raju.
We have a big round of applause for our panelists, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So if you look at the media headlines, it's amazing because there's no topic more polarizing than AI. On one hand, you have the Pollyannas who claim that AI is going to solve everything: world hunger, climate crisis, social inequalities, and usher us into an amazingly enlightened era. On the other hand, you have the Cassandras who actually lament the fact that AI is going to destroy millions of jobs, disrupt whole industries, and only aggravate inequalities worldwide. So we wanted to bring you a more nuanced perspective into AI. And so when I was invited to moderate this panel, I decided that one way to do that is to focus on the business value that AI can bring to enterprises like yours, and also talk about how you as business leaders in the audience can best leverage AI to unlock its full potential. And I must say that I'm super thrilled to have with us four tech leaders who are at the forefront of AI innovation, hence the title of this panel, the Innovation Arms Race. And so we are going to dive into it quickly, and what I will do is actually have them first introduce themselves briefly and tell a bit more about their product, and then we will go deeper into conversation. So, Vishal, can you tell us more about what your product or service does, and also what makes it very unique?
Thanks so much, Navi. So my product, we are focused on the problem of simplifying IT at enterprises and giving business people superpower, super agency using generative AI. The way we do that to start with is give business users, like people in the finance team or in the procurement or manufacturing team or sales and marketing teams, the ability to have a conversation with their data, bypassing the entire complexity that sits today between the business user and the data that they need. And in order to do that, you have to carry the burden of, on the one hand, speaking the language of the business users, and on the other hand, removing all the hallucinations, the errors that AI, because the AI models have not been trained on a particular company's data and things like that. And so with our product, a financial analyst or a finance person can simply have a conversation with what happened with their numbers, what happened in their business. In fact, even get into what are the recommendations for growth initiatives or saving costs, or what are the unusual things that have happened and things like that. It is like giving them wings. And in the process of giving them wings, you're also simplifying the incredible cost that sits there. Doing that, the difficult thing that we have to do is to, on the one hand, remove hallucinations out of data, of creating the code that runs on the data. That's a very hard problem because hallucinations are, in some sense, inherent to generative AI. And on the other hand, disambiguating things for the business user, speaking their lingo, understanding what they mean by certain words and things like that. So we have solved that, and we are seeing great success. We partnered with TCS in India, and together with TCS, together with other partners like SAP, we are seeing tremendous growth.
So you call that conversational AI? Is that one
conversational analytics to start with, but over time, conversational business.
Okay. Nigel, tell us more about your offering in the AI space.
Sure. Nigel Vaz, I run Publicis Sapient, and Sapient was a services business primarily focused on transformation. And what we're doing today is really taking a people and product approach to how enterprises need to transform. The biggest challenge we see with almost every enterprise today as tech becomes a bigger and bigger part of the ecosystem is the enormous tech debt before they can actually start to really move into the digital space. And so how do you actually leverage AI in order to release yourself from that tech debt and split the investment from 80% keep the lights on and 20% innovation to the other way around. And so our platform, Slingshot, is essentially all about how you can actually modernize and transform the enterprise at AI scale. So, we think of ourselves as the kind of Navy SEALs to the regular services industry of regular Army. And then the second platform, Bodhi, which is basically our agentic platform, is all about capturing the years and years of very specific industry-specific patterns across financial services, retail, CPG, automotive, where we've codified years of transformation knowledge into the ability to scale those solutions really fast to get agents up and running in a way that allows our clients to solve really specific business problems that we understand deeply how to solve. Because our belief today is that AI isn't necessarily limited by the technology or the compute. It's limited by a little bit of, the fragmentation of data, the complexity in the organization in terms of understanding the actual problems you're trying to solve, and more importantly, not simply applying AI to an existing approach or process, but reimagining it in the context of where you are now able to do something dramatically different than you were before. And so ultimately our promise to a lot of our clients is doing things that would take them 10 years in 2 or 3, or doing things that would take them tens of millions of dollars. And so it's faster speed, it's more economical, but more importantly, it's building intelligence in the organization beyond, for the first time, their people. So truly intelligent systems that can learn and evolve as their business evolves.
So your target is mostly enterprises, is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're enterprise focused entirely.
Jonathan, tell us more about Groq and what is your value proposition to customers?
So Groq builds AI chips. Those AI chips run AI fast, and the problem we solve is we make AI fast because no one wants slow AI, which I hear the Indian market likes. As fast as my answer.
That was super fast. We'll come back to the super fast inferencing. Chris, how about your company's value prop?
Well, it's thrilling to be here today. Thank you very much. My name is Chris Perry. I'm president of Broadridge Financial Solutions. We're a $30 billion S&P 500 New York Stock Exchange listed company, and we're fundamentally the arteries of Wall Street. We settle $10 trillion in trades per day. We send out $7 billion communications to investors. We handle the annual shareholder meetings for most public companies. And so AI for us is a transformative industry scenario where we can look for ways to de-risk, because regulatory and compliance is huge. Obviously find efficiencies in marketplace, where we can redeploy human intelligence against things that will add more value and use artificial intelligence at things that are less valued and can be done with systematized tools. And then most importantly, redeploy the dollars that are saved on growth, because growth is infinite and cost savings and efficiencies is finite. So that's what we do.
Great. So I think I wanted to, in the spirit of what I said earlier, to kind of really make it very tangible for you what actually business benefits you can accrue from the gentleman's solutions. I wanted to ask each of them to give some concrete examples about how the solution can help you achieve, truly competitive advantage. So, Jonathan, let me start with you. So, Time Magazine said that your language processing units can process AI models 10 times faster and cheaper than GPUs. So, this is called ultra-fast inferencing, I believe. Can you give us some use cases so the audience understand what business benefits they can get from such ultra-fast inferencing?
One of the main use cases for us today is starting to become coding. So whenever one of your engineers is trying to create something and they put in a prompt and they say, create this for me, if it takes 2 minutes or even 30 seconds to give you an answer, they fall out of what's called flow. That is, they lose their attention on the task and then they move to other things, which makes them less productive. By giving them an answer in 1 second, they actually can stay in flow and keep going and going and going and iterating. That's one use case. Another use case is just like when you iterate on something, you make it better. When you're fast, you can actually iterate on the response multiple times before you give it. So whenever you see the models doing reasoning, we've been doing demos this week and showing people we can often do the reasoning in about 100 milliseconds or less, meaning that before you give an answer, you're able to do that reasoning without slowing the answers down. That's particularly important if you're doing voice in AI. And then lastly, we also drive the cost down quite a bit. The thing that most people don't realize is the speed at which you output a token, which is the unit of intelligence of these models, the faster, typically, the more expensive. What our product has really done is it's sort of reset that so that given a certain speed, we cost much less, which allows us to also run fast, but also run cheaper. So in the Indian market in particular, cost is important. I've heard over and over again while here,
you're value conscious.
99 rupees per month. So that's the price target you got to hit. You can't do that if you're giving 70% margins to an NVIDIA maker or a GPU maker, and the thing's already expensive to begin with.
So building on the idea of time is essence. So I was just thinking, are there some use cases like where time is really critical, like drug discovery or today climate change? You know, there's a urgency to solve it. Are there some examples like that where your technology can be a godsend?
Well, the speed of iteration is the speed of innovation. So in science, it's not about, so you would think that you could just have a very large number of compute devices operating in parallel, but being able to get an answer and then iterate on it is more powerful. And I'll give an example. Suppose that I ask any one of you to write an essay about your favorite topic, but I tell you that you can't hit the backspace or delete key on your keyboard. How good is that first draft going to be? Probably not very good. Now, if you ask 10 different people to write an essay on that topic, none of them are going to be particularly good. But you let one of them try 10 times, having seen the previous output, it's going to get better each time. So being able to do things serially is inherently more powerful because you learn from each attempt and incorporate that. So that speed is really important in discovery or in invention.
Great. Chris, I have a question for you because we talk about AI applications in different sectors in a very generic way, but I thought maybe the audience would enjoy learning from you, like how do we apply AI in a particular sector like financial services? So I Googled before this panel, like, you know, AI financial services. A lot of the use cases seem to be all about automating workflows to make things faster and whatnot. But can you tell the audience here how the financial service sector can embrace AI in India in a way that is not just focused on innovating products and services, but maybe developing disruptive new business models that can help them deliver great value and maybe even, you know, become industry leaders?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about AI, and not very much talk about data. And AI is only as good as the data. It's a bit like if you ask your not-so-smart friend a question and you ask your smart friend a question, which answer do you want? So for us, where we sit on $10 trillion worth of settlement data every day, we sit on shareholder information around the globe, you know, we look at use cases that would allow, for example, wealth management firms to find the next best opportunity for their client, or even to find ways that will allow their existing client to refer without having to do the referral to their network. So there's lots of use cases that help people grow their businesses on the back of the data sets that exist that are very pure, because you can have settlement data that's not pure. It's reconciled every day. The other thing in our industry, in the financial services industry, has a lot of dimensions to it. Two that are really important is reducing risk. So when you make a failed trade, that's highly risky. It also has a lot of capital and collateral that can be tied up. And one of the other things we do is we are bringing technologies together. So I talked about data being important, talked about AI clearly, but we're also bringing things like blockchain into the equation to create more efficient markets, less risk. So there's lots of use cases that, you know, the Indian companies, and we have 5,000 people on the ground in India who are who are evolving from what was an offshoring, outsourcing captive to truly an innovative engineering agenda where we're building new products with product leadership that are globally sitting here.
You haven't directly answered my question, so I just want to come back to it. But can you give like one example of a client or someone who you helped who actually used your solutions to reinvent themselves or come up with a new business model that actually they couldn't have done without the technology, for instance?
Well, the one I would focus on, you're asking me to give away proprietary secrets. The one I would probably look at is today, the ability to bond trade is complex. And you generally have to have a Bloomberg terminal to do that. What we've been able to do is use natural language to talk to analytics, again, leveraging the data, because you put the data next to it. You have to have the data to do it. And we've had institutions that have been able to use something called Bond GPT, which is a natural language engine to ask very complex questions and launch new business initiatives. That's been one. There's been others that the hedge funds would use, because hedge funds are looking for anomalies to trade. One very well-known name that I can't mention has acquired certain data, and with the computing power and AI, their traders are able to do things in real time that often they would have to have analysts do for them. And the iteration speed that Jonathan's talked about is it's profound. It's seconds of response time on things that would be days, and when the market moves away. So these are the kinds of new business initiatives firms can do as technology providers or traders or both.
So thanks for sharing those transformative impacts of AI in the financial service sector. Nigel, I want to come back to you because one of the things we are beginning to do here is to show that there are many low-hanging fruits in AI that can be reaped at some point, and that's what everybody's writing about. But you have been very critical, or at least softly critical, about the fact that today there's a lot of hype around AI tools, but the real value in the long term is going to be having AI platforms. And you are actually helping deploy what you call foundational enterprise AI platforms in companies. Tell us more about them, and in a way, what's the value for the leaders here to embrace that as opposed to chasing the low-hanging fruits with some point solutions?
I think what we've seen is an explosion of proofs of concepts, right? Because we've seen those a dime a dozen, and they're very hard to scale in the context of the value that you ask. So a lot of the work we're doing is actually saying what business problems can be solved to the platforms I was talking about before in a specific industry. So I'll use a couple of examples. So in hospitals, getting referred to biopsies is super expensive because you don't know whether a tumor is malignant or not. So how can you actually either support or aid, or in some cases, do the same job that a radiologist with 20 years of training might do, looking at a number of scans to start to determine whether somebody needs to go to a biopsy or not, right? That's crazy specific problem in a specific industry like healthcare, where you are affecting meaningfully not only the patient experience, but billions of dollars in cost for procedures that might be unnecessary and painful to the individual to actually solve. I'll give you another one in the hotel space. And these are things we're doing now, and they're live, and they're being used to create or save millions of dollars, right? How many of you, well, all of you probably many times a year will book a hotel room? What's the process to do it, right? You go to a hotel website and you say, these are my dates. I'm looking for this kind of room in this kind of place. But the intent behind what you're actually trying to do is hidden from the hotel because it's got very specific parameters by which you. What if you created a white box, which we did in the case of one of the largest hotel groups in the world, and said, hey, we are a couple with a young child. We're looking for sun in this price range and a flight distance not more than so many hours from where we live. And you just got back options, right? That transforms your experience because you were able to express what you're looking for, the young child, the kinds of things that might be interesting to them, but then to them, it gives them the intent behind why you're asking for what you're asking for. So it allows them to match inventory that otherwise might not have actually shown up in the context of your language to you. So it's essentially helping them actually use inventory that otherwise might never have been served up to you because they were going on the basis of what they thought about you versus what your intent was. So dramatic outcomes in terms of conversion rates, but also the speed at which you're executing.
When you said enterprise, I also want to interrupt you, but I think the two examples you gave, one of the things that happens in the late 90s when the internet came, there were a lot of point solutions adopted by specific functions. So I was kind of wondering if you can also explain like how having an enterprise-wide AI platform enables like kind of cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
yeah
and
absolutely.
avoid the kind of ILOs of.
But I wanted to start with the consumer side, right? Because the enterprise side is much more technical and interesting for some of us. But actually, I think a lot of people are like, well, what does this AI actually do for me, right? And in these instances, if you did that, so let's just take the hotel example, right? And you start to say, one of the biggest challenges in a hotel like that is you've got 5 or 6 systems that the person at the check-in desk needs to access in order to figure out whether you're a loyalty member, where you last stayed, what your preferences are. There are multiple systems. There's a room management system. There's a property management system. There's a, there are multiple systems, right? And what you're now basically saying is, hey, the biggest issue, the reservation system, all of these things were built on mainframes, built in the 80s, in some cases even earlier. Very hard to change. So what's been happening since the internet is we built layers and layers on top of that, a little bit like Vishal was talking about, to abstract the complexity from those. But the actual core of those systems have stayed the same. You can look at financial services, and most banks run mainframe core banking at the core. So when they compete against a fintech to change a product or to offer a new service, it's extraordinarily complex, which is why in the hotel example, all the margins got taken away by digital OTPs, right? Online travel portals, because they were able to abstract themselves from that legacy and change the consumer interface. And what we're now saying is, you've got to start to be able to use AI to do stuff that was going to take you 10 years to do, and maybe tens of millions of dollars, to accelerate the process, but more importantly, institutionalize the knowledge that sat in a mainframe, which was extraordinarily hard to access and very difficult to interface with, in a way that you can engage with it to solve problems like, oh, this person's just walked up. We understand their preferences. We understand they may not have the right status, but we're looking at their forward bookings, and they've got a lot of them. And so we make a different decision than we might have made otherwise. Or in the case of a bank, you're basically failing a credit check because your credit scores are bad, but that might be because we haven't joined the dots on the fact that you actually don't borrow a lot. You run a cash-heavy financial services presence, in which case we can still afford to loan you that loan on the basis of securitization against the cash that we have access to. These are decisions that just were not possible to be made in the enterprise because these data sets were separate. The systems essentially were monolithic. And so now when you institutionalize a platform like our Bodhi platform or our Slingshot platform, what you're doing is you're extracting all of the insight from these systems that were monolithic mainframes that were really hard to change in order to create the kind of flexibility of a system that's learning as you go. Because I think the biggest shift we have to make with AI for me in the enterprise is move the knowledge from the intelligence being just in people to being in people and technology that's truly intelligent, as opposed to technology that we have not been able to communicate with, and a whole cadre of engineers essentially got built because these systems were too hard to talk to.
Right. Yeah, this concept of infinite personalization is critical, because before you would build apps in most verticals, but financial services, for 7 personas, high net worth, whatever it would be. With AI, you now have the ability to do infinite personality responses. And in a country with 1.6 billion people, that's pretty important. So I think that's going to be a launch pin for institutions, especially the O-lines who are pulling. The mainframes work fantastic, actually, but they can't do anything modern. So you got to pull those things out and then put layers in that'll be modernization that creates personalization for your customer, so they don't leave you and go to a disruptor.
Absolutely. For a land of great diversity like India, definitely offering personalized solutions would be a godsend. Vishal, I come back to what Nigel said about the need to reduce the complexity of accessing things like mainframe data, which now becomes easier. And you have made your life mission now to humanize AI by making AI tools easier to use. Tell us why the notion of usability is becoming important to boost AI adoption, and maybe you can even touch upon whether India has a kind of an advantage in that area. and also explain like how having a seamless user interface is critical so that the frontline employees, not just decision makers, can actually access this data and make use of it.
No, absolutely. So if you look at a business user who is a completely non-technical person, giving them the ability to have a conversation with their data, it needs a lot of scaffolding. They want to know how their business is doing. They have a new region that they opened up in, or a new product that they launched. How is this doing? Or they have a cost-related initiative that they need to get into. They have thousands of questions. And to Jonathan's point about flow, once you give them a way to have a conversation with the data, that they can stay in their flow, so their next question and the question after that and the question after that can just keep coming, it is incredibly powerful. The value of that to the enterprise is enormous. If you ask a question about, hey, how is our new product doing in Latin America or some new region that you launched in, and the IT guy tells you that, hey, can I get back to you in 5 days? You have forgotten why you wanted to ask the question in 5 days. You have to be able to get back the answer in a second or in a few seconds. Or if you ask complex questions like, I have this initiative, I need to save costs in these areas, or I need to understand why certain customers are not as profitable as these other customers. You would be asking analysts or people at consultancies and so forth to go and find out those things. Now you can get that done, maybe not in 2 seconds, but in 2 minutes you get back a well-researched analysis that has gone into all corners of the data to figure out why that happened. These are magical things to business people. But getting there, you need to give them the scaffolding that if you ask a question that the system doesn't understand, instead of hallucinating an answer, you need to say, hey, did you mean this or did you mean that? So it opens up entirely new paradigms in usability. Now, if you think about in the Indian context, you go into creators or artists or artisans, people like this, giving them, there is a big bridge to be built between them and the AI systems, which may be fluent in the thing that they are interested in talking about, but to give them that access needs a usability, needs the local languages, understanding their domain, where they're coming from, their context and things like that. So I think the more that we wish to empower people with AI, the more important usability becomes, the human centricity becomes.
So usability, building on Chris' point about the diversity of this country, you also think that's a factor to boost accessibility? Because you often talk about, I'm an expert in frugal innovation, so India is known as for affordable innovation, but I think you're saying that accessibility is important because if you don't speak in the same language, even if it's cheap, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Part of the speed point that Jonathan made also makes things accessible. When you do things faster, you are inherently lowering the cost of doing this. When you want to have, so if you look at DeepSeek, for example, DeepSeek dropped about, there is a wide consensus now, as far as I can tell, that 50x improvement in price performance compared to comparable models. There is still going to be a lot more, there is still a lot more room to improve there, and yet there is a scarcity of compute and products like what John builds. So I think to get AI access, one of the things the Prime Minister really is passionate about is how do you get 1 billion people access to AI? Creators, artisans, teachers, people who are making jewelry or making textiles and things like that. You have to drop the cost of the access dramatically in order to do that. So advances in the infrastructure, of course, in Silicon, but also the advances in making the models cheaper to run and making the technology accessible through various access channels. All of these have to be done to get this to the point where 1 billion people can access this.
All right. Now, I'm also conscious. I promised that I will carve out some time for addressing at least 2 of your questions because time is running out. But I do want to segue into the second part, which is going to be more exciting, close to my heart, which is how can actually India not just leapfrog, but actually trailblaze next generation AI models and practices and paradigms. So I want to start with Jonathan. Your question for you is, so clearly India is going to be a big AI demand market, But at the same time, the reality is that we are still kind of depending on a lot of global players, whether it's for computing, for chips, or even for capital. So what's your take for, or advice for India to assume global leadership in AI? Should we build our own full AI stack like we did with the DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure, or should we play it smart by aligning with some global players, including yourself? You're most welcome here to set up an R&D center, and at the same time protecting our national interest. So which way we should go?
Okay, well, I'm a little biased, so I say you should work with other players, but I would play to strengths. So one of the mistakes that I see over and over again is that everyone wants to recreate the entire AI stack from scratch. If you want to create the entire AI scratch from stack, what happens is you start building the models, then you start building the systems, then you start building the chips. Well, then you have to build the fabs. And don't forget, you have to build the wafers, and don't forget, you have to build the machines that build the wafers, right? It's silly. At some point, there will be interdependence, and that's actually good because that leads to peace and prosperity, because then you're forced to work with your neighbors. So I would recommend, instead of trying to do everything from scratch, pick the areas where you have comparative advantage, focus on that, and then others will be happy to trade with you. Now, the biggest issue that I've seen while I've been here in India, it's actually the language gap. So these models are not trained very well on the Indian languages. Depending on whom you ask, there's 12, 20 plus languages that you must support to be viable. Indian companies have that data, but what I would recommend is I would put together a group to pool that data, and then I would fine-tune the existing models. So a lot of people are trying to train their own. The reason I would recommend against this is these models learn universal truths that can then be kept when you go and you fine-tune it further. And I'll give an example. So everyone thinks that these models just auto-complete the next word. That's true, but auto-completing the next word is actually quite powerful. So suppose that I have an entire detective murder mystery novel. It's 100 plus pages long, maybe 200 pages long. And we feed in the entire book up to the point where it says, and the detective said, the murderer is. For you to autocomplete that, you had to understand everything that happened in that book. You had to understand social interactions, you had to understand the evidence, you had to do reasoning, you had to do all these things. All of that is in these models that are being open sourced. If you then take that model and you fine-tune it with Indian language examples, you get all of that benefit for free, and now it knows how to speak these languages. So my focus would be, take the existing open source models, let other suckers spend $5 billion, $10 billion training these things, then spend a couple $1 million fine-tuning it for the Indian market.
So building on that, Chris, let's apply that thinking to a particular field like financial services. As you may know, India has an ambition to become a global financial service hub, as we see with the creation of the Gift City in Gujarat. So what's your take? And by the way, Chris was telling me that he actually visited other well-known financial services hubs around the world. So what can India do to kind of not leapfrog, but trailblaze in terms of becoming a world-class financial service hub, but also building a next-generation financial services infrastructure by leveraging creatively AI?
Yeah, this is incredibly exciting here in India because if you take places like the UAE, Guernsey, the Bahamas, these are tax havens for investment, and you have many asset management firms, many of which are clients of ours, that are operating in those places. What they have is governmental tax status, and they have money. And you come to India, and you have the ability to do those things. You government support right now, clearly, to create this status. There is government money that can be behind it, given the prosperity, and you have tech computing capability here. They don't have tech computing capability there. They buy it, and they apply it. But here you can bring it all together and have one unique proposition that I think is highly differentiated. I think the other element of this is that locally you're going to have an infrastructure that the minister talked about 200 gigawatts of renewable energy here soon and 500 gigabytes in 2050, because energy is going to be really important. You talked about fuel in your remarks earlier, that AI is more like fuel and internet. That's a bigger conversation I'd love to have with you. Ask Robinhood if it fueled their business worldwide. But I really think that you've got to have the power to be able to do it, and your government is enabling that. So you bring those things together, and there's a profound opportunity for tax status. So you don't have to go to Guernsey. There's not much in Guernsey. It's not a very big place, but you get great tax status. You now have that ability here with the infrastructure that wants to mature, because if India doesn't transition from an offshore low-cost arbitrage to a tech leadership innovator, AI is going to be its biggest problem.
I agree. Good point. So on that note, let's come to Nigel. So you also have been advocating the fact that business leaders have a role to play in terms of governing the adoption of AI. And India is a very young and impatient nation, and we don't want to wait until 2030 to harness the full potential of AI. So what suggestions you have for the business leader in the audience so they can start unlocking the AI potential starting next year and not wait until 2030?
Yeah, and I go so far as to say not next year, but now, right? I mean, because I think that the biggest opportunity you have today is not to simply apply AI to what you're doing today, but really look at every aspect of what you do. And we work with so many businesses from hospitals and healthcare and retail and CPG to reimagine how you would do this in an intelligent environment where the intelligence is held outside of just your people. I mean, talking about the India angle just for a second, Sapiens part of Publicis, one of the largest advertising marketing holding company, and we built a platform for them called Core AI, which took an industry that's been kind of matching brands and consumers for 60 years through narrative and story, and saying, how do you get that same emotion, but do it in a way that allows you to target that person on the basis of their, not only just what they've done from a cookie-based approach, but do it in a way that allows you to harness the interactions, pre-login, post-login in the context of an experience, and get the right message to the right person on the right channel on the right device to cut out all of the spam and cost, right? So you're improving the outcomes for the end consumer, but you're fundamentally taking something that's been done one way for a really long period of time and just reimagining it in a very different way. And I think that is the power of, AI today, to just change the economics. So you take a business that was primarily run one way and you create significant amounts of value by just reimagining it in the context of how it could do something today.
So not just optimize the existing business, but think about,
and real reimagination. And the one thing maybe I'll just chip in there is we use an analogy called SPEEDS in the context of our transformation. It stands for strategy, product, experience, engineering, data, and AI. And across all of those, we think that those are like fingers in the hand. If you reimagine all of those, you can really create acceleration to move quickly in an AI-first world.
Unfortunately, we're running out in 40 minutes. We have wrap up, but I do want to give the last word to Vishal, because you did meet Prime Minister Modi earlier this year, and you had a long conversation about AI, and he expressed his interest in using AI to empower the youth. So how do you see AI playing a role in empowering youth employment in a country where 12 million young people enter the workforce each year?
No, I met him earlier in the year, and I also met him day before yesterday. He is really looking forward to his speech tonight. He's very passionate about, in particular, about the youth and giving the young people, the students, all the way into middle school students, even younger, the access to AI, so they can, whatever it is that you do, whatever walk of life you are in, it is now possible to all of a sudden have access to sum total of all that is known about that field. That is an incredible power, and we have to switch our perspective from how is this going to affect our jobs and things like that, to how does this empower us? How does this make us stronger? I think he has a unique ability to understand these concepts. He understands them in his own way incredibly quickly. It's something very, very impressive. But where he wants to apply this, there is an event coming up in February where he wants to showcase this. In particular, how the youth of the country can really benefit from AI in whatever it is that they do. Not in any particular one field or the other, but in whatever it is that they do. And I also want to, Navi, on the point about should we have our own model, I think, Jonathan's point is right, obviously, that you have to partner with the best and so on. I think that has to be done. But at the same time, AI is too important, and India is too big and too diverse and too important to the world to leave that incredibly important layer. We have to have our own models. I think to me it is absolutely clear.
Sorry, we have to wrap up, otherwise we'll be kicked out. So thank you so much, and give a big round of applause to panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our panel for that sharp and sweeping look at where AI is headed and what's at stake. It's clear this isn't just an innovation race, it's a values race as well, about how we scale, how we govern, and how we really stay human in the loop.
From semiconductors to sentiment, from regulation to real-time learning, the pace is staggering and the questions are only getting bigger. A big thank you once again to our panelist, Navi Raju, and to our moderator, Navi Raju, for helping us make sense of a world that's being rewritten as we speak. All right, our next speaker oversees a $94 billion investment portfolio, shaping skylines, unlocking value, and making sure the future is built to last.
As Managing Partner and Global Chief Investment Officer at Heinz, he drives strategy across more than 30 countries with a focus on sustainable growth, innovation, and long-term impact.
When he points to the next hotspot, it isn't just theory. It often becomes the next city on the rise.
Please welcome for his address the next investment hotspots where capital will flow in the 2030s, David Steinbach.
Okay, well, thank you. My name is David Steinbach, and I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Heinz. And today, I want to talk to you a little bit about our journey as an organization here in India. We actually came to India about 20 years ago. And I'm going to talk about that journey, talk about some lessons learned in these 20 years, and as well talk about the future lens for what we think is going to be happening and the real drivers of value, and also India's unique opportunity to win in a new world that we've been talking a lot about during this conference. Before we begin, though, I do want to just give a state of gratitude for India. When we first came here 20 years ago, I will say many of the things that people talked about in terms of where things were headed, what was possible, the future of India, it all felt a little bit like an impressionist painting. Right? I mean, you could see the contours of it, but you couldn't quite make out exactly how it was going to happen, and it seemed rather distant, if you will. And it took a lot of vision, it took a lot of faith to be able to come and establish a platform in India and go carry out a vision that was, again, an impressionist painting. But there's I guess, a feeling here that really captured us in terms of when we first landed on the ground 20 years ago. And it's this phrase I think many in the room are incredibly familiar with: the guests are like God. And in those moments of the early days for us, I won't lie, there were some hard days as we were trying to establish that platform. But this country really welcomed us with open arms and invited us in to be a part of this journey that you all have been on the last 20 years. And just a lot of gratitude for that spirit. And I think because of that spirit, we were able to see through and do a lot of great things together. For those that might not be familiar with Heinz, we are, as mentioned at the beginning, we are really an international organization. We were founded about 70 years ago in the United States, and really it was one man, Jerry Heinz, who was an engineer who, after World War II, came to Houston, Texas to sell air conditioners, of all things, and started selling air conditioners, and his neighbor asked him to build a building. And he said yes, and the rest is history. And I often think about, to myself, when I think about our firm, think about all the other companies in Houston, Texas in the 1950s that were building small buildings, and where are they today, and what made us different? And I think one thing that made us different was our ability to see above the tree line, if you will, and to see where opportunities are, and to be able to take some uncommon risks to be able to do that. So today we're about $100 billion under management. We're in about 30 countries. We do both development and acquisitions. We raise funds. We work directly with investors. And here in India, like I said, we've been here for about 20 years. We have about 20 million square feet under development currently, and about 3 billion of AUM. So while it's only a small piece of our larger pie, we do see India as one of the key drivers of growth going forward, which is what I'm going to talk about. So it's interesting, I think it's really important when you think about even the future of India and what is going to be happening here in the next decade. It's really important to ground yourself in what's happening around the world, because I strongly believe that the world has changed. A 40-year chapter has come to an end. And that 40-year chapter was marked by globalization. It was marked by falling interest rates. It was marked really by a lower cost of getting things done because of deflationary forces that were in the world. And that created huge tailwinds for capital globally. And all of that ended a couple of years ago when the Fed increased interest rates by about 500 basis points. It's almost a dramatic end, if you will, to that era. And what's interesting about that is nobody working today globally has really lived in any other environment other than what we've been in. And I think that presents a significant opportunity as you think about what's ahead. Without question, to me, the last 40 years have been downhill skiing in terms of riding interest rates down, and on time, on budget doesn't matter as much when you have financing and cap rates. In my world, cap rates are there to bail you out. Now in this world that we're in today, it's all about alpha. It's all about creating value on the ground. It's cross-country skiing, which is a different sport, as we all know. And I think that, again, getting your mind around that is going to be really important to think about how capital is going to be viewing India in this new world. The other thing that is important to know is that obviously a lot's happening. We've been talking at this conference about globalization, tariffs. On the panel that's going to be coming next, I'm sure we're going to be unpacking a lot of these things. My only comment to this room is to really be interacting with these changes as opportunity. And don't waste too much time mourning the loss of an era that's gone, and be thinking about and embracing an era that is coming. Because what's exciting about new eras is you get to write new rules, and there's new players, there's new entrants, there's the ability to get more market share. And so I think having a scarcity mindset as we think about the state of play of what to do, that scarcity mindset can be very dangerous, I think. Instead of having more of an opportunity mindset about what new world do we want to create. And I think that's the mindset that we need to have as these new trade realignments happen, new trade corridors occur, and I think India's place in that is going to be very unique. So we all know the numbers in terms of India's growth trajectory. No reason to repeat that here. I know everyone in this room is very familiar with that. The only comment I'd make, though, is when you think about the comments I just made, right, in terms of how capital is changing their view of the world, their view of risk, reward, returns, going from downhill skiing to cross-country skiing. As that world is getting realigned, and you think about what's likely to be the return profile for much of the West the next decade, much more of a stagflationary environment is probably what is going to be playing out. And you juxtapose that with the opportunity of India, again, I think India is going to look ever more different in that world. And it's only just a few percentage point changes of capture of capital is a significant amount of capital flowing into India. And that, to me, is the opportunity. So don't lose sight of how, even though the world might have viewed India in a certain perspective the last 10 years, we all should be thinking freshly about that relative to where money can go elsewhere. And I think, again, very exciting. So just to kind of round out, so that was kind of the future lens. Now just some reflections on the last 20 years in our experience here. We've been very active in Gaggan, and that was actually one of our first projects. And landed on the ground, this is what it looked like. And I'm sure many in the room know this very well. And this was the Impressionist painting, right? There was promise of infrastructure, promise of a lot of things, but it was not here yet. Meanwhile, we wanted to do some things and build some projects. Meanwhile, today, much of that promise is now reality, which is exciting. And it's exciting to live through. And I think everyone should be celebrating the things that have been accomplished to date. A couple other images here. This is in 2010. This is Gaggan, and the little star is our project, One Horizon Center, which was our first one. And this is today. And you can see just what a dramatic transformation. The other thing I'd say about when you look at this picture, and this is just imagine a satellite overlooking India. This is one pixel, right, of an entire country. And just going back and forth on these two pictures, the amount of things that need to happen is monumental. The task is great. The opportunity is great. And these are things that we're excited about. Kind of my last few comments. I think similar to building a building, you have to think about the foundation, right? And you have to get the foundation right. And that's certainly something that we're excited about here in India, that the last few years there's been a lot of reform to help developers like ourselves have a level playing field. And we just welcome that. And thank you just for the country for doing that. We encourage that to continue. But we also think, similar to our own project, which One Horizon here, we wanted that project to be globally recognized at the global standard and attract global tenants. But we also wanted it to be uniquely India, unique for where we were building it. And I think that's also going to define the next decade for India too. India's going to do this in their own way. They're going to join, be a part of this larger table, this new table that's forming, and do it in its own way. And that's also very exciting. So just to conclude, I have an ask, because I know there's policymakers, there's decision makers, there's people that really are controlling many parts of the economy in this room. And the ask is keep going. And so kind of if we're on a trip together, I have a little acronym, so just a few words I want to leave you with. First, if India wants to be competitive in this next decade and capture outsized market share, stay on the transparency. That is a trend you have to stay on, and you have been doing very, very well. Also, resilience, building an economy that is reliable and resilient to shock absorbing, to things that come, absolutely critical. Continue the path of an inclusive economy. I know this is important to the government. I think would encourage that. It brings stability, and capital wants stability in things to invest in. And last, and maybe almost the most important, is predictability. This is something that you must have more of in order to get more capital. So these things, the TRIP acronym here, incredibly important. So just to conclude my comments, thank you for the last 20 years here. Looking forward to building the next decade together, and also continue to share my thoughts on the panel. I'm looking forward to see how India is really cementing its seat at the table on its own terms. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that sharp perspective on capital, climate, and community can all grow together. Our next speaker advises top CEOs and governments on some of the biggest questions of our time, from digital disruption to sustainable growth.
As a global chairman of PricewaterhouseCoopers, he's helping shape how ambition becomes action, especially across the global south, through technology, talent, and above all, trust.
Now, for this address, titled Technology, Trust and Transformation, the New Business Playbook, please welcome Mr. Mohammed Kande.
Hello. Well, good afternoon. All right. Listen, it is great to be back here in India. I've been coming here to India for the past 20 years, and every visit reminds me how quickly things change. New industries, new technologies, and new ways that Indian business shape the global economy. It is actually an honor to be here with all of you, leaders who are helping to define what comes next. I'm going to talk about technology, trust, and transformation. The intelligence age. As AI capabilities advance, we are living through a turning point in history. We call it the intelligence age. We had the Industrial Revolution, the digital revolution. It is now the intelligence age. Information is the foundation of everything, from how our bodies work to how supply chains and businesses run. AI makes it cheaper and faster to turn information into value. That changes the game, and I will tell you why. It means that we will be able to design, discover, and solve problems in ways that once felt impossible. But like any revolution, progress will come in bursts, sometimes moving quickly, sometimes slowing down. But in just a few years, our world will look different. You can count on it. For business leaders like all of you in this room, this creates both opportunities and pressure to reinvent, but also uncertainty. AI may look virtual, but it runs on very real foundation: chips, rare minerals, data centers, and large amount of energy. One AI query can use 10 times more energy than a traditional web search. It is actually expensive. Some data centers now consume as much electricity as entire cities. To meet that demand, we are all witnessing technology companies investing in nuclear power, energy providers expanding into digital infrastructure, real estate developers building around data centers, manufacturing, retooling for chips and equipment. This shows that the AI era depends on both the digital and the physical, and that reliance is pulling industries together in new ways. We call it value in motion. Why value in motion? Because we are finding that value is moving from different industry sectors into others. It is also creating new ways for companies to solve problems and create value. Automotive, technology, energy, and telecom companies are now working together to reinvent mobility. Healthcare and technology companies are combining today to rethink patient care. Food and agriculture players are linking with data and logistics to reimagine how the world is fed. These shifts are just not about partnerships. They are about reinvention. Old revenue streams are giving way to platforms, ecosystems that cross industry lines. We are now seeing that, for example, a car company is no longer selling just vehicles. It may also provide energy storage, mobility services, and digital platforms. A hospital not delivering just care, but also operating as a data and analytics hub. Problems are going to be redefined as we move forward. How do we move? How do we power ourselves? How do we feed ourselves? And how do we care for billions of people? Can no longer be solved by only one industry. They demand new business models that cut across sectors and redefine where value comes from. Now, in this new reality, leadership depends on clarity about the problems you are solving and the business models you are building to solve them. But unfortunately, industry convergence is only part of the story. The line between the public sector and the private sector is now also shifting. Governments are making direct investments in chips, energy, and digital infrastructure like we have never seen before. They are setting new rules on data, trade, and security. Companies now need to adapt to those rules, but they also have to help shape them. We have to be part of the discussion. This means that geopolitics is no longer separate from business strategy. This is a new reality. Public and private roles are converging, and leaders need to reinvent how they navigate both the public sector and the private sector at the same time, something that we never had to do for the past 15 years. Partnership with governments will become as important as partnerships with industry peers. So what should we do next? I'd like to share 4 principles that can help. First principle, and I have the privilege today to have a business in about 140 different countries with 360,000 people across the world. And here are some of the lessons that we learned. The first principle, be sure to connect data points. In times of uncertainty, you cannot rely on instinct alone, and assumptions cannot be facts. Leaders need enough signals to make informed choices, and that means connecting data points that others see as separate. By connecting information across science, business, and technology, you have to reinvent how you redefine sectors going forward. Reinvention starts this way, bringing together data and insights that sit in different silos to uncover new opportunities and new business model. Second principle, fail fast and learn even faster. In fast-changing times, no leader has perfect certainty. Acting only when every variable is clear means acting too late. Some efforts will succeed and some will fail. Both outcomes are useful. Success shows what works. Failure shows what to change. The faster you learn, the faster you find the right direction. What sets strong leaders apart is that they never stop learning. When the pace of change is this fast as we are witnessing today, and I will submit that we have not seen change happening that fast for the past 15 years, the ability to keep learning and adapting is one of the most important qualities a leader can have. You know, transformation is not a big leap. It is a series of steps where each outcome, positive or negative, builds a foundation for the next move. Third principle, don't just refine, reinvent. We have already seen how industries are converging and how business models are being reinvented, from mobility to healthcare to food. The lesson is very clear, especially about AI. AI is not just for efficiency play. Small improvements are not enough. The leaders of this next era will be the one who take those lessons and apply them inside their own companies. Reinventing your businesses using AI is not about asking, how do we do this faster or better? But how do we do this differently? And it is very clear with how we see industry sectors being reconfigured today. The choice is simple. Reinvent yourself or risk being reinvented by someone else. Fourth principle, build on trust. You know, we did a study that showed that AI has the potential to increase global GDP. Think about it, all of global GDP, by up to 15%. 15% in the next decade. But that outcome will depend on trust. Without it, that growth will be closer to 1%. Trust must exist at every level. Users need to trust results from AI. Employees need to trust that AI will increase the value at work. Society needs to trust that AI is a net positive. So for business leaders, like all of us, this means taking actions. Choose the partners you trust, not just the technology, but for their integrity. Make sure AI is implemented responsibly, with strong governance and clear accountability. Reinvention will succeed only when it builds on trusted technology, trusted people, and trusted relationships. In conclusion, if you take away one thing from my remarks, let it be this. The business playbook is changing. Industries are coming together in new ways. Reinvention, not small improvements, will decide who will win. And trust will determine whether AI delivers value. These are things that the leaders need to focus on. Now, let me wrap up by talking about India. India is already a leader in technology. India has scale with a large and ambitious population, more technologies than many countries have people, and you have a culture of innovation that is growing fast. AI makes this leadership even more powerful. It will democratize access to knowledge and creating the chance for breakthrough ideas to come from anywhere. This means India's role on the global stage can grow even stronger in the years ahead, and the opportunity is bigger. Together, we have a chance to reinvent how the world moves, how it powers itself, how it feeds its people, how it delivers care. These are the problems that matter most. These are the problems that I believe that the leaders in this room can help solve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kande, for that powerful perspective on what it takes to build for scale, inclusion, and for the future.
All right, our next speaker is someone global investors turn to for clarity, especially when markets aren't offering much.
As Global Head of Equity Strategy at Jefferies, he's known for his sharp macro lens, contrarian takes, and long-term view of Asia and the emerging world.
Please welcome for his address, Asia's Equity Strategy in the Global Context, Christopher Wood.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be talking about global financial markets. I'm going to run quickly through some charts on the US global situation and then move on to a few charts on India. I've heard a lot of talking about AI in the last 2 days. My base case is that AI is very important, but the internet was also very important. Back in 1999, 2000, 2002, we had a big internet boom and a dramatic collapse. All the speculation on the internet proved to be right in terms of the impact of internet on the global economy, but that didn't help many of the stocks that went down 95%. In my view, we're having an even bigger overinvestment bubble in AI than we had with the internet back in 1999, 2002. So that's my basic view of the outlook right now. My stance on the global markets, I made a call at the end of last year that the US has made an all-time peak as a percentage of MSCI All-Country World Index at 67% on the 24th of December. That's partly because the US is extremely overvalued as an equity market, and partly because I think the US dollar has made an all-time peak. Next chart. This is the MSCI All-Country World ex-USA Index. What this shows is that world markets, excluding US, have broken out of a trend of trading range they've been in since 2009. So this chart, for now at least, is confirming my view that the US has made an all-time peak. I'm talking equity markets. Next chart is valuation on the US stock market, S&P price to sales ratio. You can see we're now at an all-time peak in terms of price to sales on the S&P 500, way higher than we were back in 2000 when we had the NASDAQ collapse, or indeed in 2008 when we had the global financial crisis. And why I look at price to sales, not price earnings, because that basically takes out the distortions of very aggressive non-GAAP adjusted US accounting. Next chart. This is the reason why the US market has gotten so expensive. That's the dominance of the 4 major hyperscalers and NVIDIA as a percentage of S&P 500. Basically, the US market has been running on the AI CapEx arms race theme since early 2023. The catalyst for the AI thematic to enter the stock market was the Microsoft investment in OpenAI and the launch of ChatGPT. And at that point, it was clear to me that you needed to own what I call the picks and shovels of the AI trade. And the biggest picks and shovel of the AI trade is NVIDIA, because everybody has to buy their chips. So since the beginning of 2023, 47% of the gains in the S&P 500 have been made up by the 4 hyperscalers and NVIDIA. Personally, though, I wanted to own the companies being paid for the CapEx, not the hyperscalers like Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, who are paying for the CapEx. So the amount of money being invested in AI is truly gobsmacking. We've got projecting $350 billion to be invested on AI by the 4 major hyperscalers this year, and that's not counting all the other investments, including sovereign AI. Next chart, this is the 4 major hyperscalers, 4 major hyperscalers CapEx to revenue or operating cash flow. So CapEx for the 4 hyperscalers as percentage of operating cash flow has risen from 41% in 2003 to a projected 63% in 2025. The reason why these big tech companies have been such fantastic investments since 2009 in the US is they each were in their own space or their own moat, and they had asset-light businesses, and they generated this incredible free cash flow. However, with this AI story, all these major US big tech companies are each exiting their moat. They're all converging on the same AI space. 1, because AI is the next big growth opportunity, but 2, because AI represents a big disruptive risk, so they have no choice really but to invest in it. But I think it would be very naive to assume that all these major incumbents are going to succeed in not being disrupted by AI. And what is clear is they're no longer asset-light businesses because of this huge amount of CapEx they're spending. So AI has been the big driver of the US stock market, but also it's increasingly the driver of the US economy. So in the first 2 quarters of this year, real private fixed investment in information processing equipment accounted for a greater part of US GDP growth than US personal consumption. I.e., without the AI CapEx story, we would have a very weak US economy. And obviously, one part of this massive AI investment is the massive spending in data centers, and we are going to end up with a massive excess capacity in data centers, just like back in 2002, we ended up with a massive excess of fiber optic capacity. So then you will get the overinvestment bust, but the positive consequence of the bust, just like the bust back in 2002, is that operating the technology will become extremely cheap, and therefore AI will become very important in the economy, but a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money in the meantime. Next chart, from an Indian standpoint, goes to the topical point of tariffs. Right now, we have an average tariff rate in the world as calculated by the Budget Lab at Yale of 18.6% globally, which is the highest tariff rate since 1933. So far, the markets, we had a big sell-off on the original tariff announcement on what Donald Trump called Liberation Day and what I called Impoverishment Day. But we've had a dramatic rally since that sell-off, primarily because the markets refocused on the AI CapEx story. But the simple point about tariffs is what you would have learned if you studied economic history. That is that tariffs are beggar thy neighbor policies where everybody emerges a loser. But this will take time to show up. And in the case of the US, it means higher taxes for ordinary Americans. In terms of what you do about the tariff threat from the US, the reality is that most countries trade more with China than with the US, so there's a limit to how much they're going to be willing to compromise with the US administration. China has sent the best example that if you stand up to the bully, you prevail. So we had the extraordinary situation of the European leaders scrambling to go and see Donald Trump on the Trump-owned golf course in Scotland. And yet we have the equally extraordinary spectacle of the US president, who's obviously increasingly desperate to arrange a one-on-one meeting with President Xi of China. And so far, President Xi is playing hard to get. And because he wants to have the meeting with President Xi in the autumn, that's the reason why you, as in India, are being sanctioned for Russia, even though China buys more Russian oil than India. Next chart is the inflation. So Jerome Powell gave a speech at Jackson Hole Conference yesterday, which basically signaled that he's going to start cutting rates, probably 25 basis points in September. And he's doing that partly because he's gone under such incredibly huge pressure from the Trump administration, and partly because the labor market in the US is clearly weakening. But as a statistical fact, inflation in the US remains well above the formal year-on-year 2% target. In the short term, the inflation is likely to pick up because of the impact on tariffs. But in the longer run, the impact of tariffs should be deflationary because it will hit the purchasing power of ordinary American consumers. On the 10-year, on the US Treasury bond market, my view is the US entered a bear market in Treasury bonds back in 2022. I think we're in a long-term structural bear market in Treasury bonds, and the reason the Fed has been under such pressure to cut rates is simply because the Trump administration is desperate to get the interest rates down to reduce the cost of debt servicing. This is the key chart on the fiscal situation in America. Net interest payments and entitlements, which is basically Medicare and Social Security, accounted for 93.5% of total federal government receipts in the 12 months to July. So that tells you that in any kind of downturn, the US fiscal situation stops working because the revenues will go down. However, there is one source of increased revenue thanks to Donald Trump, that is the tariffs. So right now, the tariffs were $27 billion tariff revenue in July. So tariffs are running $27 billion a month. So that's one source where revenue is picking up for the US. But I think the risk of tariffs is they've turned out to be recessionary in the US, and that will then therefore cause a cut in revenue. Next chart just relates to the short-term funding of the US government debt. 48% of marketable Treasury securities in America, 48% of Treasury bonds will mature before the end of 2027. So that there's increasingly short-term funding in the US government, and that's why they want to get the cost of the interest rates down. Foreign central banks have been selling Treasury bonds for many years, as you can see in this chart. On the dollar, I think we've made a long-term peak in the dollar, and the dollar's in a long-term downtrend. And for now, Donald Trump himself wants a weaker dollar too. This is the net international investment position of the US. And you've got an extreme net international investment position in the sense that foreigners have invested much more in America than Americans have invested offshore. And that's why there's a huge potential for capital to flow out of the US. Meanwhile, we've got a big boom in trade between emerging markets. So trade between emerging markets continues to rise, and a big part of that is growing Chinese exports to what's called the global south. Valuations. How much time do I have? Sorry. I need another 5 minutes. So valuations are remain very low. So we have distressed valuations in emerging markets and Asia. I'm just going to jump some charts to get onto India. Before I get that, 2 charts on China. China's annualized trade surplus at record high levels. And next chart, it stopped working here. Well, so I'm getting to the Indian charts. Can we go back one there, please? No. So this is the this is stalled. This just keeps. These charts are no longer working here. There's been a technological breakdown. Okay, so sorry about that. I've had to conclude because I wasn't able to get to the Indian charts. Can you get them connected? Okay, so I'll just, have we got the time? 20, if you go to 26, apparently we're getting them back, so 26, yep. What's going on here? 26. Okay, go up forward 1 chart, please. Okay, so this is, I'll just end with a few charts on China, India, and gold. So this is China. So you see China, despite all the slowdown in exports to the US, we have a record trade surplus in China, which is why, in the big picture, I think the renminbi will continue to appreciate against the US dollar. This is the Chinese stock market, which in my view made a major bottom last autumn. So while I continue to view the Indian equities as the best stock market in the world, long-term stock market story in the world, for people in India who want to diversify and buy a cheaper market, I would recommend putting a bit of money in China. Here is the state of play in India. So last year we had a central bank, Reserve Bank of India was being quite hawkish, which in the long run has been healthy. The tightening in monetary policy and credit policy we had in India last year I view as healthy. But now we've had a much easier, we now have a much more dovish central bank in India. Interest rates are coming down, and because the dollar is weak, I'm hoping that doesn't hit, the easier monetary policy does not hit the Indian stock market too badly. In terms of the macro story in India, we've had the only real disappointment to me in India on the macro side is we've had less of a private sector capex cycle so far in this cycle than I would have expected. You see in this chart, back in 2002 to 2009, we had a very strong private sector capex cycle. Then we had a big unwind. We had problems in the banking system in the 2015-16 era. The banking system's been cleaned up. The corporates have deleveraged. But it's still a fact that most of the capex in the last 10 years in India has been done by the government, not by the private sector. So my hope is that while the capex cycle has not been as strong from the private sector as you might have expected, I'm hoping it's going to be more protracted and drawn out. Credit growth and deposit growth slowed down in India last year because of the monetary tightening by the RBI, but the monetary policy has now turned much easier, so I think we're seeing the worst now of the slowdown in credit growth. Valuation-wise, India is always an expensive market, just like the US, but the real valuation excesses have been in the mid-caps, not the blue chips. So foreigners have been reducing exposure to India recently, but everybody understands that India is a long-term growth story, and normally trades at a valuation premium. So our view is we're now back at a historic average valuation premium of India relative to other emerging markets. In terms of a positive for the corporates, but the negative for the equity market in the last 6 to 9 months has been a huge increase in supply. Because of the high valuations, corporates have been placing equities. Private equity firms have been bringing in companies to the market. So we've had a big pickup in supply. In the month of June, we had more than $10 billion of supply, and that has put a bit of a natural cap on the stock market, but you can see the supply is coming down. So I think this sort of temporary indigestion to supply from a long-term standpoint is a buying opportunity. But this year, after the very euphoric stock market last year in India, to me, this year is a year of healthy consolidation. But what's been very impressive in India in recent years and remains highly impressive is the ongoing boom in the domestic asset management industry. And you can see here the ongoing big inflows into Indian domestic equity mutual funds. And what's really impressive is that these inflows continued despite the correction we saw late last year, early this year. And part of that is clearly people investing on monthly installment schemes. So the asset management industry, the wealth management industry in India is a hugely successful story, which I expect to continue to be a very successful story. And actually, India today is the most dynamic capital market in the world after the US.
On that note, Chris, I'm going to just interrupt you for a moment. Unfortunately, we've been instructed by the Prime Minister's security contingent. We do need to sort of follow the security protocol in advance of his upcoming session. So please bear with us. Chris, we'll have to leave it here. It's one of the most interesting presentations, and this opportunity to hear directly from him in person today, we all know is a rare privilege. So big round of applause, please. Coming up next, we will be shifting gears to the world of capital, how it's moving, where it's going, what it means for a global economy increasingly shaped by fragmentation and flux.
It's a conversation that you won't want to miss, featuring some of the sharpest minds in global investment and insights that go well beyond the headlines.
That's coming up, but until then, feel free to take a very quick break, catch up on a conversation on two. There is going to be a security sweep in this break. We request you all to make your way to Shah Jahan Hall, and we'll see you right back here in a little while.
An important announcement, you have to take all your belongings with you, laptop bags, phones. There will be a security sweep. If you leave things behind here, you may not find it when you come back. So please leave nothing in this hall, and you have to leave the hall as part of the security protocol. Enjoy your tea break and be careful.